A few years ago, before I was doing long-form content, I made a series of short history videos surrounding the original .hack IMOQ game series, consisting of 4 games: Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine. .hack offered a unique setting where players would enter a fictional MMO full of characters canonically controlled by other individuals. Simulating the world of an MMO within a single-player environment, .hack was able to take several liberties in the genre to create a more unique and memorable experience. With a story focusing on AI, viruses, and individuals rendered comatose from the presence of daunting, godlike beings with unnerving designs, and a slew of content and experiences unlikely to exist in a traditional MMO, .hack really hooked me from the get-go. But it wasn't the games specifically that got me interested in the series. .hack was pushing the envelope to provide a true multimedia experience for viewers and players alike. Project .hack consisted of manga series, novels, games, a CD drama, and anime. In fact, as someone corrected me on in my previous video, Legend of the Twilight, an anime and manga series, started publication in 2001 before the release of Sign, despite Sign being considered the start of this specific collection of .hack media. Another broad multimedia package, Conglomerate would house the creation of a new trilogy of games, those being .hack GU Volumes 1 to 3. It's those games that we will be focusing on in this video series, starting with Volume 1 Rebirth. While my original video series was strictly historical, these upcoming videos will be similar to my retrospectives, so we will not only dive into the development history of the games, the story, and the mechanics, but we will also analyze those mechanics as well as the themes that are presented within. Additionally, I'll be focusing on my experience with the series, and that means revisiting the original versions of the games on the PS2. .hack GU, unlike its IMOQ counterpart, received a collection remaster release that included the shorter 4th volume as a sort of epilogue to the story. This game has several changes and updates to the gameplay that you can probably see scrolling past the screen here. While many of these changes are simply quality of life improvements, some of them are more disruptive to what the game originally was, making various aspects of the game easier in the process. Nothing wrong with that, but I want to discuss the series as I played it back in 2006, so this video will cover every single aspect about this volume from that era. If you enjoy these videos, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. I recommend you tell all of your friends about .hack and spread the word so that Bandai and CyberConnect 2 continue creating new games within this series, and hopefully remaster the original series, as many players have been asking for that for some time. .hack offers something truly unique and wonderful within the gaming medium, and I would like to see it developed on further. With that out of the way, and a big potential spoiler warning for all things .hack, I'm SuperRad, and this is the big .hack GU Volume 1 Rebirth Retrospective. First announced on May 16, 2005, followed by a preview trailer at E3, .hack GU was brought to the public's attention for the first time. After the release of IMOQ, CyberConnect 2's development team was split off into 2 groups, one for action games and one for RPGs. The action team began work on the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games, and the popularity of these releases ended up affecting GU in various ways. For example, working on Naruto allowed the team to learn more about cinematography and character presentation, leading to more robust scenes within the sequel series. While Naruto was an important aspect of the company's structure due to its popularity, the RPG team still managed to double in size in comparison to the one that worked on IMOQ. This new series of games became part of a release schedule surrounding all of .hack at the time, including the anime, mangas, and even Fragment, which released shortly before it in 2005. Fragment was a popular Japan-only multiplayer game using IMOQ as a base that simulated the gameplay loop of an MMO despite not being one by any real means. Hiroshi Matsuyama, creator of the .hack series, stated that due to criticism surrounding IMOQ being 4 games with little mechanical changes between them, the GU would be 3 larger volumes with each entry being its own experience. This made it sound like the entries might be standalone, but that wasn't the case. Additionally, Matsuyama stated at the time that GU Volume 1 would be bigger than all of IMOQ combined, which is probably not true just based on playing it. I'm not sure how we would measure that in concept, but it definitely doesn't feel like that's the case. Rather, GU feels like it's almost the exact same structure as IMOQ. You have 3 games instead of 4, but all of those games are connected to one another, having you transfer your save file from Volume 1 to Volume 2 to Volume 3. However, that doesn't mean that Matsuyama was taking the criticism for granted, since many new mechanics, especially to the battle system, are introduced as the player progresses through the series. Haseo, an adept rogue, unlocks the ability to use new weapons from different classes in the game, and eventually gets his own unique class as well, with these offering new ways to take part in combat, plus all of the various side content that gets brought to the player's attention. After the release of Quarantine, Matsuyama mentioned wanting to completely destroy the world, the name of the MMO that .hack takes place within. In fact, the game started being made by only a portion of the team under the title Project GU, and wasn't supposed to be a .hack game at all, later ending up under the umbrella and designed around it. This situation was similar to how .hack as a concept came to be, as it wasn't originally a game about an MMO at all, but rather a thievery game that was considered so boring, it got split into 2 ideas centered around stealing, one being a treasure hunting game and the other centered around hacking. This led to the concept of data draining, which is prevalent throughout the series and one of the game's core mechanics. As I mentioned, the title of the original games comes from the abbreviation IMOQ and stands for infection, mutation, etc. However, GU is used throughout all 3 volumes of the sequel. It's a rather esoteric title since not many people know what GU stands for, but in an interview for GameSpy, Matsuyama mentioned that GU stands for Grow Up, and the themes of the game would center around the development of Haseo, the main character, who starts off as arrogant and angry, slowly learning to open up to others and become a more mature person. However, Matsuyama also mentions that there are 12 other meanings, all abbreviations of GU, and they are all related to the storyline within the 3 volumes. I believe these are the titles of the terminal disc entries that we will talk about a bit later. So despite Project GU shifting focus, they kept the title GU as it fit into what they were trying to present to the player. Matsuyama wanted a greater focus on the fact that these are players in a game with real lives. .hack is meant to simulate an MMO environment, and so he wanted the player to feel like they were interacting with real people, even when it's obvious that they aren't. A big help in making this simulation feel authentic was the fact that every member of the development team was playing an MMO at the time, whether that be for personal reasons or just for research's sake. Most of the development team played Final Fantasy XI, and I think that game definitely shows the most influence within .hack as a whole. If you ever wanted to play something that really gave you the feeling of the .hack series as a real MMO, I will always recommend giving 11 a try. However, some developers played other MMOs as well, including Ultima Online and Lineage 2. Individuals from outside the company made their return as well. Yoshiyuki Sadamoto of Evangelion fame and Kazunori Ito from Ghost in the Shell each returned to work on this series as character designer and scenario writer respectively, although not to the level they had for the original games. An example of Sadamoto's involvement is mentioned in an interview where it is explained that in the original preview trailer, Haseo has no markings on his face, and it was because of Sadamoto that they were added in later. Koichi Mashimo would also return to direct more of the anime content as he had done in the past. While Sign was a sort of connecting force to show us another side of the world, Roots would end up being a dedicated prequel to GU. I won't be covering Roots in intense detail, but I will mention aspects about it to offer context within the game's storyline. While it is a sequel, there were stylistic and thematic changes from IMOQ. While they tried to keep the main character Kite sort of basic and easy for the player to follow, they wanted to tell a more elaborate story surrounding the growth of Haseo, and also change the surroundings to showcase the sort of darker nature of the world, while also showcasing the beauty of the MMO. There's a more modern and steampunk aesthetic within the world R2, meaning Revision 2, than the purely fantastical design of the world R1. Creating Haseo's design was especially difficult for the team as they wanted it to be as elaborate as possible, but the technical limitations of the time prevented that. Haseo would have had a cloak at one point, and weapons would have come out of it to attack with, but the amount of power necessary for a design like that wasn't feasible for what they were trying to create on the PS2. In an interview, they mentioned that even at the time, years later in 2013, the cloth physics were still difficult to achieve. Additionally, Haseo's design is stated to be based on the character Manji from the manga series Blade of the Immortal. Matsuyama wanted the games to be tailor-made for those that never knew about the series previously, meaning that an individual could get everything they needed to out of GU without interacting with the rest of the series. However, fans of the series would be rewarded with references both large and small peppered throughout, such as the presence of Azure Kite being visually similar to the protagonist of IMOQ. Funny enough, but players had already guessed before the release of the game that Azure Kite was an AI, something I never realized until the reveal within the game. While designing the game, the team wanted to balance it so there was intense action, though not so much as to frustrate the player, as they wanted to make sure consumers could enjoy the story, a concept they mentioned being a sort of crutch for JRPG developers at the time. They said something along the lines of JRPGs creating games with weak mechanics that would be driven more so by the story, and that was the crutch. I don't completely agree with that, because some games have great gameplay and are JRPGs, but yes, others don't and have amazing stories, so who knows. During development and past the release of GU, CC2 created a magazine serialization called .hack GU The World, which focused on teaching the reader about the .hack conglomerate. This was a sequel to .hack The World, which acted as a similar feature for Project .hack. The magazine included several manga within that lended itself to the story. Released on May 18, 2006 in Japan and October 24th in North America, .hack GU Volume 1 hit shelves with a standard edition at $39.99 USD and a special edition at $49.99 USD. The special edition included an action figure of Haseo plus the terminal disc, a digest used to help the player understand what happened in the previous games while also rewarding them for playing through the entire trilogy. By having save data of each game, the player would periodically unlock new logs to be interacted with within the terminal disc, adding to the meta nature of the game's multi-volume design. The games were released to mixed reviews. Many found the repetitive dungeon designs and avatar battles boring, but praised the upgrades to the battle mechanics, narrative, and voice acting. The trilogy was also praised for the upgrades that were added along the way to the finale. If you want to know more about the development history of .hack before GU, feel free to check out my history video on the series that I'll leave a link to in the description. In the meantime, let's now take a look at the various aspects of the first volume, including the storyline and mechanics that are offered to us. The story of .hack GU on its own isn't overly convoluted, but by being attached to a long-running series that spans over multiple media projects, there's a lot of backstory that can be missed by going into the game blind. As Matsuyama mentioned, they tried to make the game as easy for any player to get into regardless of their experience with the series. But that doesn't change the fact that a brand new player is going to miss so many major aspects of the past storylines that many key points within this storyline might be confusing to them. If you ask me what the bare minimum was to take care of before playing GU, I'd probably say to watch the majority of .hack roots to help lay the groundwork for why Haseo ends up the way he does. However, on a personal rewatch of the series, I remembered that the ending episodes of Roots sort of overlap and deviate from the start of the game series, so even then, the opening of Volume 1 may still end up being confusing to you. All of this to say that there is a barrier of entry when it comes to not only GU, but .hack as a whole. It's a series that heavily connects itself and references the entries before it constantly, and to get the most out of it, maybe even the bare minimum in my mind, you should probably start where everything begins, probably with the anime sign, before playing IMOQ, then maybe watch Roots and then play GU. That's a really annoying barrier of entry for a large swath of players. I could hardly recommend anyone go through the trouble, but luckily, they don't have to. As many newer players know, .hack GU Last Recode, the Collection Remaster series released on more modern consoles, offered the terminal disc built-in from the get-go. Previously, this was only offered as a bonus within the Volume 1 Collector's Edition, so many players would have missed out on experiencing it. What we need to understand is the expectation here. .hack IMOQ was a unique experience, not just because of the time spent within the game itself, but because of the presentation. The game was delivered to you not only through the game disc itself, but also the OVA packaged with every volume. So the developers already set a precedent of providing additional context and storyline in the form of OVAs within the game's base price. Every entry of IMOQ had an extra disc within it that allowed you to watch Liminality, and yet this is not the case with GU. Considering how crucial I believe the terminal disc is for newer players for the recap alone, you would expect it to be packaged in with all copies of GU, regardless of edition, but that wasn't the case, which could inhibit, again, a large swath of potential buyers. The terminal disk even has its own mechanics tied to you playing through GU. Each journal entry we can interact with, aside from the first 4, are locked away, and they only unlock by reading saved data from each of GU's 3 releases. Journal entries 6 and 10 unlock via Volume 1 as an example, so not only does this disc provide crucial backstory and context, perfect for newer players, it also provides mechanical satisfaction that your progression is unlocking more for your experience. It's a complete fumble that every player didn't have access to this until the remaster years later. But what is a terminal disk exactly? It acts as the journal of Jun Banshoya, an employee of CC Corp who was tasked with working on Project GU. You can see they keep a lot of the terminology from real-world development within the lore of the game itself. Titled End of the World, with the disc appearing as if it was burned and titled by Jun himself, the disc is designed to offer context to newer players about the past 4 games, as well as new information that is unlocked by playing through GU. .hack as a game series prides itself on the mechanic of carrying over progress from one game to another. Your levels, items, progress, etc. can all be converted into the next game as long as you beat the one before it. Similarly, GU will look for data from the previous .hack games to offer some bonuses we will talk about later, and the terminal disk has locked files that open up through your progression. Nowadays that might not seem like that big of a deal, but on the PS2 it was a novel feature and added to the meta complexity of the series, acting as a sort of hook. Sure, you've played games and their sequels before, but what if they were all so connected that everything I did in the first one carried over for me into the second? It has been done before, sure. .hack is far from the progenitor of this concept, but that doesn't mean it isn't interesting, especially for a young kid in their grandmother's basement who has nothing better to do at the time. The terminal disk boots up into a variation of the Ultimate OS from the first 4 games, housing 12 files for the player to choose from once they are all unlocked. This OS at the time was the norm, but by the time we would be watching these entries, Ultimate would have a new version of the OS that was used by the main character of .hack GU, Haseo. Jun was the lead developer in Project GU and was hired to first analyze the world R1 due to the events that took place during IMOQ. Each entry or interim report is titled using GU as an acronym. For example, Interim Report 1 discussing .hack infection is titled Graceless Union, the next is Geeks Utopia, and this trend continues throughout. While the first 4 reports act as a recap for the player, we do also unlock reports 6 and 10. You don't get all of the reports just for having saved data. Some are unlocked by specifically having a clear flag signifying that you have completed the current storyline of that volume. Since reports aren't unlocked in order, this can give you a bit of a confusing narrative to follow, but it isn't impossible. When I played the games as a kid, I didn't even know the terminal discs existed, and while I have since watched them online, being able to experience the slow progress of unlocking them, acting as a reward for completing the games, has been a fulfilling experience. One that I, again, think should have been offered to all players from the start. Report 6, Gateway to Utopia, focuses on the loss of Aura from the first series and the World Revision R1. Jun explains that the loss of Aura, the ultimate AI, caused a network crisis that spread across the entire internet. CC Corp formulated a plan to fix the issue by restoring the AI. This was the creation of Project GU. Engineers, AI developers, and more were brought on as a team to work together in restoring Aura. Jun specifically was the representative of CC Corporation in this project. The first step of the project was the RA plan, which looked to restore the 8 phases of the Morgana Factor. To keep things simple, these were 8 bosses that you would fight in the original games: Skaith, Innis, Magus, Tarvos, Gore, Maha, Fidhel, and Korbenik. Or Korbenik, he says it weird in this one. I always say Korbenik, but it's probably Korbenik. The plan was to seal the phases into character data and allow a player to take control of it. The reasoning for this being possible is due to Sora's affiliation with Skaith during Sign and into IMOQ. Sora is Haseo in .hack GU. Are you still with me? Maybe this is more convoluted than I thought. Jun mentions that there was a crucial member on the team, a man named Joyatoro Amagi, who would have a large impact on the series moving forward through further .hack media. While discussed in End of the World, Amagi wouldn't become as prevalent until the releases of media like .hack Link and Quantum later on. The first phase the team was able to retrieve was Magus the Propagation. Keep in mind that all of this is happening in the world R1 at the moment and not R2 where GU takes place. So the team managed to create what we call an epitaph user, a character with a phase attached to it. However, things weren't that simple. Players that tried to use the special character would experience vertigo, nausea, and headaches that prevented them from playing. Amagi theorized that the phases had to choose the right host to attach themselves to, and this would later turn out to be the case. This is also where we can first learn about the tragedy of Elk and Mia. Within IMOQ, Mia was an AI character that Maha had attached itself to. Elk was in love with this character, not realizing she wasn't an actual player at the time, and fell into an ocean of sorrow when Kite, the protagonist, was forced to kill her. However, she was later restored, cheering Elk up in the process. Jun then tells us that they managed to extract Maha off screen by destroying Mia again, which is really messed up if you've played the original games. Not only would this break Elk's mind, but they essentially murdered Mia to do this. The effects of these acts would form Elk's player into who he is today, now known as Endrance in the World R2. Entry 10, the final one we unlock for Volume 1, talks about the failure of Project GU and a fire that destroyed 80% of the data for the world. This led to the game shutting down. During the final days, Jun logged in to see the game off, only to be visited by an AI that talked to him about Aura. From here, the World R2 was later developed and leads into the beginning of the game's storyline. I don't think it can be stressed enough how, as a mechanic, the terminal discs are borderline crucial to offering you the complete GU experience. Similar to liminality in how it provides additional context from outside of the world, the fact that this wasn't included in all copies of Volume 1 is a sin. You can tell they tried to make up for this with some animated features within the game itself, but it is hardly the same. Ultimately, while I think it is beneficial to attempt playing the original entries on the PS2 due to various changes in Last Recode, I'd still recommend newer players just get the remaster due to its ease of entry alone, as well as the integration of the terminal disc functionality. GU Volume 1 has what I would consider a fairly confusing start. Opening with the creation of Haseo's character within the World R2, he is greeted by two other players known as Ioten and Asta. These players act as a sort of tutorial for you, the actual player, to become familiarized with the mechanics of the game. The game being .hack, not the game The World. This is going to be confusing, I know, and I'm sorry. What's nice is that, due to the setting of it being an MMO, this feels way more immersive than when you would play old games where NPCs told you to press the circle button or something to that effect. These are actual players telling you what buttons to press because you're technically playing a game within a game. Within this tutorial, we learn how to invite people to our party via member addresses, and how to use the Chaos Gates to enter various fields and dungeon areas in the game. Players can form parties of up to 3 players in order to tackle content within the game. Using member addresses, they can contact these individuals via the in-game mail system, as well as send emails to one another on their desktop OS. Within the world, a Chaos Gate is used to create an area for the player to explore. By using a combination of 3 area words, a player can pinpoint areas that suit their needs. If you want a high-level field area with a beast temple, you can attempt combinations of words until you find one that works for you. Within the mechanics of the game itself, we need to find and unlock these words through using the community forums or by ranking highly within the field itself, which we'll discuss a bit later. This process means that the world is less an open world game and more a heavily instanced experience. However, due to the combination system, there are a near infinite amount of areas for players to explore, leading to rumors and legends forming and people often spending their time searching for rarities that may be hidden away. In that sense, the world is a social sandbox MMO where the players make up their own goals and adventures. There's quests to take part in, sure, but this is only a small aspect of what the world offers. You can see the heavy influence of older MMOs here. While Final Fantasy XI may have slightly more direction and active storyline to take part in, a large aspect of that game is the social elements and doing whatever you want at the time. Same for games like Lineage and Ultima Online. Especially nowadays, this offers a nostalgic experience for older players, as well as a more unique and novel experience for newer ones. Haseo is taken to a field area with Eoten and Asta. In the original games, fields were sprawling areas that looped in on themselves. Now they are more linear and built around islands connected via bridges. While in IMOQ a field may lead to a dungeon to explore, GU looks to simplify these concepts heavily. Fields now come in two variations, but they are all designed basically the same. Enemies will litter the map and various chests and collectibles will be scattered around for you to find. Specifically, there will be altars that always have a chest but are guarded by 2 to 3 monsters. If the field has a beast temple, 3 of the altars will contain a symbol fragment instead of an item. Once all 3 symbol fragments are collected, a door will open in the temple and you can collect the treasure within. Beast statues exist within both the world R1 and R2 and are seen as rewards for making it to the end of a dungeon or getting all the fragments in a field. They usually have more unique or rare gear than what you can find in the field or dungeon as you progress. Alternatively, a field might skip this process entirely, removing the beast statue element and just having a field boss for you to find and defeat for a reward and increased experience. So fields and dungeons have been more heavily separated within this game, and areas feel more simplistic because of this. A field is always basic by design, and this in turn makes them less interesting to explore. However, that isn't saying much considering the fields in IMOQ were also generally very empty. Both of these series can be basic and bare bones in many ways, as we will learn, and that lack of perceived depth can be very off-putting to players trying to get into the series. While GU adds more elements to combat in an attempt to make it faster and flashier, it sort of loses things from IMOQ that made the game's combat feel a little more satisfying due to friction in design. GU is an easy game, like through and through. There is very little friction or challenge to be had, and so fights rarely feel rewarding for completing outside of the experience you may receive from them. In comparison, IMOQ could sometimes feel borderline unfair, especially when fighting Kubia or some of the phases. Your level mattered heavily, but it was also beneficial to you to be heavily prepared by stocking up on items and buffing the shit out of yourself and your party during the encounter. There is little to no incentive to do that in GU, and this became even easier in Last Recode. So not only do we have fairly simplistic combat that we will talk about a bit later, but it's not challenging us at all. The combination doesn't offer a lot of engagement for the player, and if it were any other game that wasn't .hack, I probably would have fallen off of it very early on. You need to understand, I love .hack because I grew up with it. A lot of my appreciation for it is the novel features, the aesthetic, but I am very aware that I let a lot of what makes this game bad slide because of my affinity towards the series. So while I am able to get past many arguably bad design choices, I will be acknowledging them. Eoten and Asta teach Haseo the very basics of combat, but what's funny is those basics are basically all there is to it. Haseo plays an Adept Rogue, one of the jobs within the game. An Adept Rogue is a jack-of-all-trades character that can eventually be 3 jobs at once but master of none. His starting class is a Twin Blade, a highly mobile class designed around quick successive attacks that are low damage but help put the enemies into a Rengeki state. In reality, the majority of the battles are going to go like this. You mash the X button. You will rarely if ever be punished in a way that actually matters for turning your brain off and just mashing. The only time this isn't the case is if the opponent's guarding, then you charge the attack by holding X and release it to do a guard break. There's a guard system where you hold circle to block, but rarely if ever do I see it as a necessary aspect of combat unless I'm fighting something that can consistently interrupt me and knock me down mid-combo. To make the combat more elaborate, we have the skill trigger system. By pressing R1, the player can activate their skill trigger. This system interrupts enemies' attacks and cancels whatever they were doing, allowing you to perform a combo and then cancel into a skill to extend said combo. After using a skill or charged attack, a skill gauge will need to refill before you can do it again, but this is a fairly quick process. So okay, combat usually goes like this. Mash into a skill trigger and then keep mashing until you can skill trigger again. Rinse and repeat until the enemy enters what we'll call a Rengeki state. If you attack enemies consistently, they will eventually be opened up for a Rengeki. During this short period, the enemy cannot act, and a skill trigger will become a stronger Rengeki finisher that deals increased damage. This is where Twin Blades excel since they perform rapid attacks. It's much easier for them to activate a Rengeki because of this. The only thing that really hinders you in battle is your SP, which are the points used to perform skills. No SP means no skills. But even then, since this is an MMO, your party members usually have items that they will use on you to refill that for you for the majority of your time in a field or dungeon. As a comparison to the original games, the combat was even more simplistic, with the player simply mashing to attack. Within IMOQ, to use skills you had to pause the game and go into the skill menu to activate them. Now we have proper shortcuts that allow us to use several weapon skills easily at the push of a button. I say weapon skills because skills are unlocked for your weapon by leveling up your ability to use it. This is done by performing skill triggers, with extra skill experience awarded when a Rengeki is performed. Every few levels will gain you a new skill trigger, and you can continue to do this for each weapon you unlock throughout the volumes. Additionally, Haseo can use certain items to gain spells that you can use more traditionally through the menu system, although I never see these as necessary. Enemies in this game have elemental affinities, and you can see those affinities when creating the area. But rarely, if ever, will these actually matter, another failing of the game due to its simplicity and lack of challenge. It feels like they were really on the right path, but just didn't stick the landing. It's very satisfying to combo an enemy and even juggle it off of the arena wall, but there's no real complexity past that. In the original games, enemies would attack you from all over, and that could get pretty overwhelming. While the challenge was there, some fields could feel frustratingly obtuse. To combat this, running into a group of enemies within GU causes an arena to form that doesn't allow other enemies to interfere. However, player characters can access these areas, leading to some niche scenarios. After defeating a group of enemies, you will be awarded experience points. These points are determined based on the enemy's level in comparison to your own. And I believe the type of enemy is also a factor. Obviously, bosses give more experience than smaller enemies, but some smaller enemies seem to offer more than others. Obviously, bosses give more experience than smaller enemies, but some smaller enemies seem to offer more than others. Unlike some MMOs, the amount of experience required to level up in the world is always the same, always 1,000. The only difference between levels is that you need to fight increasingly difficult enemies to level up at a normal pace. However, while some new enemy mechanics are displayed throughout the game, most of these higher level mobs are just stronger versions of what you have already fought. So there's no real difference in the leveling process as long as you keep up with upgrading your gear. The point I'm making is that the process of hitting 1 to 50 in this game is incredibly repetitive. And you know what, maybe it's meant to be emblematic of the real MMO experience. The grind in many of these games can be dull at even the best of times. However, since the leveling process is so fast, it luckily doesn't feel like the end of the world. You can hit the max level of 50 in Volume 1 fairly early if you want to, although you'll have many opportunities to do this naturally throughout the storyline. Still, considering how dull combat can feel, fighting hundreds of enemies really starts to take a toll. So moving back to the story, Ioten and Asta teach Haseo about symbol fragments and beast statues, etc. Unfortunately, as Haseo picks up the reward, he is betrayed by the two, who proceed to bully him and PK his character. PK stands for player kill. Within the world and some other MMOs, all areas outside of root towns or safe zones, the hubs we exist within before adventuring, are PvP enabled. Within the backstory of .hack, this was disabled at one point within R1 and then later brought back in R2 due to complaints. The reason PKing is so scary in the world is because it seems to cause you to lose items and experience. I don't believe it's properly elaborated on, but for some reason, even though it is an MMO, players need to save their progress within the game, else risk losing aspects of it. This doesn't make sense at all within an online environment like an MMO and could potentially manipulate aspects of the game negatively, but we'll let that go for now for elaboration's sake. We know through past entries in the series and roots that PKers can take items from their victim. That alone is a big risk to players within the game, and this leads to PKers running rampant as the act is borderline encouraged. We learned during the beginning of Volume 1 that Haseo is considered a PKK, who specifically hunts down players who target victims. To try and offset some of the PKs, the arena system was later made, but this never seemed to fix the issue. PKing and its rampancy is a major focus on the games within GU. After Haseo gets attacked, but before being fully killed, he is rescued by the enigmatic player Ovan, who welcomes him to the world. Here's where things will get confusing if they're not already, for players who are going into GU fresh without experiencing roots at the very least. During his early days in the world R2, Haseo joins a guild known as the Twilight Brigade, run by Ovan and co-operated by Shino, who Haseo develops a love interest for. Many things happen in Roots, but the major event is that Ovan goes missing for some time and Shino gets PK'd. However, when she is PK'd, she doesn't return to the game, and we learn later that she ended up in a coma, becoming a lost one similar to players in the original The World, who would end up comatose after being data drained. Haseo witnessed Shino fall and sees what looks like Kite from the original games leave the scene. Thought to be a famous mystery PK known as Tri-Edge, Haseo makes it his obsessive goal to track him down and find out how to save Shino. However, while attempting to do this, he becomes such a vile, obsessive freak that he pushes everyone around him away. GU time skips from Ovan saving Haseo to this point. Haseo is a famous PKK known as the Terror of Death, which is, coincidentally, the title of Skaith in IMOQ. Haseo, still obsessed with finding Tri-Edge, seems to have grinded the game to its fullest, allowing him to overpower most other players. He constantly hunts down and harasses PKs and apparently sometimes normal players to see if they know anything about Tri-Edge. After an action scene of Haseo obliterating a bunch of PKs, he ends up heading back to the root town Mak Anu. The world is made up of several servers, and each of these servers generally will have a root town, the hub area where you use chaos gates to switch servers or find areas to explore. Mak Anu was in both the World R1 and R2 and acts as the main hub for all the players within the game, although Volume 2 and 3 add some new ones. The server for Mak Anu is Delta, and we will later unlock Omega when we start to deal with the arena. Both Mak Anu and the field/dungeons you will explore focus heavily on a steampunk setting. Mak Anu focusing on this aesthetically, and areas focusing on it more mechanically. Delta's server is used for players to complete areas within the 1 to 50 range, and as we progress through the volumes, new servers will be introduced to take us from 51 to 100, and 101 to 150 respectively. It is highly beneficial for you as Haseo to explore Mak Anu fairly frequently, not just to access the various shops, of which there are many, but to run into other player characters. By doing so, you are able to initiate trades like a traditional MMO experience, and even give gifts to your party members which they can equip if they have the levels for it. Within trades, you can check the player's inventory and choose an item you would like, then offer up items until it's balanced out into what the player deems as a fair deal. Mechanically, you are trying to match the inherent value of the item you want by filling a gauge in the center of your screen until the deal is considered acceptable. So there's a little guesswork here, and it's less like talking to a real player and more like purchasing any other item in the game just through a simplified bartering mechanic instead of with GP, the game's currency. It still adds to the experience at the very least. While visiting Mak Anu, Haseo meets Adeli and Sakaki of the in-game Moontree Guild. Sakaki chastises Haseo for PKKing, believing he and the PKs are all cut from the same cloth, and ruin the game for other players. Adeli has the same character model as Haseo's friend Shino, which causes him to really resent her throughout a large portion of the game since he has the emotional control of a toddler. I mean it when I say Haseo is probably one of the most annoying, insufferable protagonists of any game you'll play in your lifetime. Normally that'd be a big knock against the game itself, and it is, but not necessarily for those reasons. GU is about growing up, about watching Haseo mature on his adventure to save Shino and the lost ones that are like her. But through the grand majority of Volume 1, we see very little progression in terms of him maturing. There are little events here and there, sure, but mostly he's just cruel and belligerent. And since Volume 1 feels so slow and drawn out throughout the storyline, this really ends up feeling like a chore to work your way through. I plan to elaborate more on it, but IMOQ gives you most of the mechanics that make the game unique from the get-go. Kite unlocks the ability to use his bracelet and hack the game almost immediately, and that is then expanded upon on his journey. Meanwhile, the adventure of Haseo in Volume 1 is much more focused on what it would be like to be a regular party member in the World R2, at least only until he finally unlocks his potential as an Epitaph user. But that takes quite some time, and it starts to feel like there are portions of the game where nothing is happening, and even when the player finally does unlock the ability to participate in avatar battles, they are few and far between when comparing them to everything else that happens in the game. Essentially, for a game called .hack, the hacking aspect takes a back seat for a huge portion of Volume 1. During this conversation with Adelie, Haseo sees Ovan for the first time in months and chases after him. Traveling to one of their old meeting places, a lost ground, Haseo finally reunites with his old guildmaster. Some may think that Ovan's oversized arm is just an aspect of his character design, but this couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, it's said to be a black box that cannot be breached and contains more data within it than even an entire area. The mystery of Ovan's character is a large plot point in Roots and continues to be throughout GU, although not as much in Volume 1. It seems obvious from the get-go that Ovan is attempting to manipulate Haseo for some reason. He offers Haseo information about Tri-Edge and points him towards another lost ground, Holgron's Cathedral. To clarify, Lost Grounds are special areas within the world R1 and R2. They are thought to appear and disappear of their own will and are outside of administrator control, unable to be deleted. How is that possible? Well, it's brought up in the terminal discs and past series, but part of the world is another black box developed by the creator Harold Hewick. This aspect of R1 was transferred into R2, hence why anomalies are still possible within this version of the game. Holgron's Cathedral is where Sheena was PK'd by Tri-Edge before going comatose. Ovan suggests that he has info that Tri-Edge will appear at the cathedral again and suggests they meet up there to defeat him. However, when Haseo arrives, Ovan is nowhere to be found. The sound of a tuning fork plays, a prevalent symbol usually signifying the presence of those in-game anomalies. An orb of blue light appears, and Tri-Edge forms from it. The being that appeared from the light does not seem to be a regular player character. However, he does resemble the protagonist of the original series, Kite, which will be an important aspect that gets brought up later in both this volume, in like a mechanical way, and the next two. Succumbing to his rage, Haseo attempts to fight Tri-Edge without Ovan and can't seem to touch him in any way that matters. Like Kite in IMOQ, this being activates the Twilight bracelet on his arm that allows him to perform the action Data Drain. This ability was used by Kite to deal with data bugs in the phases of the Epitaph. Said phases also had the ability to data drain, and this is often how victims fell into comas. Now in front of Haseo, this player character resembling Kite data drains him. Haseo falls to the ground and begins to go unconscious as he sees Ovan finally appearing at a nearby entrance. However, instead of ending up in a coma, Haseo's whole system resets and he finds that all of his data has been wiped clean, all emails deleted, and when he logs into the game, his character has been reverted back to level 1 with all of his inventory missing. This is the true beginning state of .hack GU, but let's backtrack a short moment and discuss the desktop we were just looking at. Altimit OS is the main operating system used in the universe of .hack. It is specifically used within the game to help simulate the idea that you aren't playing a character in a fantasy world, but rather a player who lives in a modern/futuristic Japan. You are a normal human individual who is playing an MMO, a game within a game, and that allows the developer to sort of pull off some cool what-if scenarios. Like, what if your desktop had all these bells and whistles that we know would be more annoying than not in the real world? Don't get me wrong, when I was a kid, I used to think this OS was actually the future. I thought it was so sleek and cool that I even tried to remake it with some wallpaper application or something like that back in the day. And while the presentation is great, the actual user experience is incredibly slow and clunky. That isn't a criticism of the game, mind you, but as a real-life OS, Altimit would be lacking. For what the game is trying to accomplish though, especially in the mid-2000s, the concept of this futuristic UI that we use to check our email, forums, etc., hell, even the concept that forums are still incredibly prevalent, was a very immersive and engaging experience. You didn't feel like you were just playing .hack in the world, you felt like you were the user behind Haseo, checking your email, responding to individuals, and catching up on the news. So what do we actually have access to on this OS? Well, while you might assume that there are executables to run things like the world and your browser, you're only partially right. For the sake of the game and ease of access for you, the real player, many aspects of the browsing experience are broken up into their own specific executables. For example, we have the ability to log into the world, but we also have the ability to check the community forums, which have various themed sections to post in using a BBS-style thread and reply system. It's either BBS or it's like an advanced version of BBS because it's GU. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's just BBS, but it might be a different one. I don't know. Within the community forums, we have topics on the world, an online card game called Crimson Versus, the news, rumors, and an art section called Apkalu. Now, from what I can gather, the community forums are used by like everyone. It's a major forum that everyone knows about, but it is community driven. Each topic that we see displayed seems to have been made by a community member, and then everyone can post within it as long as they follow the community and topic rules and guidelines. So it's better Reddit. Is that a bad comparison? I feel like someone's gonna get mad at me for calling it Reddit. It's a BBS, okay? Don't yell at me about that. I don't like Reddit either. We can assume within the universe that there are more topics than we are seeing, but for the scope of the game and the user experience, we only see what is crucial to Haseo, and what would be enjoyable for the player to see, / what would be useful for establishing lore and backstory. There's a lot of discussion and stuff to learn about the world, not just through the world topic, but through rumors in the news and Apkalu, which has a heavy focus on the world. Essentially, it's just simulating a community centered around the world, while also having an official forum, which is basically the same thing when you start to boot up the game. So they kind of overlap. It's all the same thing, and it's just meant to add the illusion that you are on your desktop, while facilitating the transfer of information from the developers to you, the player. As for the community forum, the world topic mostly focuses on the game itself, from asking for advice to complaining to asking about game mechanics like the PK system. It's a way for the player to better understand aspects of the game while feeling involved, and in many of these threads you can often respond to posts to get more information, / area words, or to raise the affection of party members when responding to them or with them specifically. News posts often focus on the news articles you can read through another app on your desktop, and the rumors board often offers up mysteries surrounding the world that can turn into larger events later on, or even continue aspects of the storyline, such as when we meet Pyros III. Apkalu will allow you to check multiple threads to see community art pieces. By selecting the piece, you can download it and it becomes available to use as a wallpaper on your desktop. You can swap through wallpapers and different background music files that you unlock through the community forum or the Book of 1000 that we will talk about more once we unlock the ability to run a guild. You can also unlock various cutscenes from the game through said book, but that's just there for the player as a gallery if they want to see the pre-rendered cutscenes again, or even old trailers once you unlock everything. On top of the forum, we have a news application. Topics are sorted into the following categories. You have nation, world, tech, arts, and archives, which I believe is used for storing old articles from previous volumes. There are many articles and forum posts for you to read within the game, and while an enriching experience to establish the setting, I wouldn't blame you for finding it all too much and giving up on trying to read everything. However, many of the news articles come with short 15 to 17 second animated snippets that emulate a news anchor explaining what the article is about, and those can be a fun little activity to just blast through to get a quick idea of the goings-on. One of the main things you will be looking forward to on the news application are new webisodes of a series called Online Jack. Hosted by Salvador Ihara, Online Jack is a web series focused on an investigative reporter who goes undercover to solve various mysteries. A buffoon and a womanizer whose objectification of women seems to get him little luck with those he interacts with, Salvador is an abysmal character who is more annoying than he is entertaining. Very similar to Haseo in that regard, at least for now. Despite this, Salvador is trying his best to learn more about a specific issue that is sweeping elementary schools in Japan, an illness known as doll syndrome, and through this we can see that he is somewhat skilled in research and digging into things to get the information and leads he needs to solve the case. In the original games, players that were attacked by the phases would end up in comas, and those individuals were known as Lost Ones. While not a coma necessarily, online games seem to once again be causing physical issues in players, this time in elementary students. Doll syndrome is a condition that has been causing elementary students to enter into a disassociative state. The causes are unknown currently, but it is believed to be tied to online games, more specifically the World R2, thanks to the research of Taiichiro Sugai, an associate professor at a medical university. Salvador attempts to interview Sugai but is turned away due to the professor believing him to be nothing more than a tabloid reporter looking to make a hit piece against him. Online Jack is a replacement for the old OVA series that was included in each release. Liminality was a 4-part OVA series that focused on events in the real world, and Online Jack is the same, but missing a lot of the animation quality and charm and especially depth that came with that series. Online Jack only has 3 webisodes within Rebirth, and they are all very short in nature. And while they reveal some mysteries and make you ask some questions, they are less eventful than something like a 20 to 30 minute OVA designed to be watched in one go per release. It just doesn't live up to the expectations of what a player received with Liminality, and is more something you would just peek at as they release in order to see what's going on. Especially within Volume 1, I found these to be interesting in the moment, but rather forgettable. Things will ramp up as we go, but what's disappointing is it feels like things ramped up right away as soon as Liminality started. Plus, it was better at making you want more and drawing you into the mystery surrounding the effects of the world on real life, as well as the nefarious actions of CC Corp. The first episode of Online Jack focuses on Salvador trying to speak to both the professor as well as an elementary school teacher, Michiru Tajima, who has had several students contract doll syndrome. Salvador generally fails at getting anything valuable out of these individuals, but chooses to harass Michiru further to try and learn as much as he can. Within the 3 episodes of Online Jack in Volume 1, Salvador is introduced to the characters I mentioned previously, and tags along with Michiru to visit the home of Doll syndrome patient Osamu Kawaguchi. Salvador breaks into Osamu's house when there's no answer, and then finds him somewhat unresponsive in front of his computer screen, which is currently displaying the words Ida over and over again. Osamu says one word, that being Sakaki, before being transported to a local hospital. If you've been paying attention so far, Sakaki is the name of the individual we met alongside Adelie at the beginning of the game. The final episode of this volume has Salvador visiting the hospital to see Osamu, only to run into Michiru and the professor as they learn that the boy has disappeared. In his room, written on the wall with what looks like blood, are the names of the epitaph phases Skaith, Innis, Magus, etc. Though several of them are too difficult to read, it's most likely all the phase names. These webisodes release as you progress through your own story. You unlock the first one right away, and the second later on, with the third becoming available at the end. By this point, you would be very familiar with the names displayed or used within the series: Ida, Sakaki, Skaith, etc. So you will begin to wonder how they are related to Doll syndrome specifically, especially Sakaki, who is currently seeming very nefarious in nature, trying to take over the guild Moontree from the current guildmaster Zelkova. And while it is not even mildly comparable to the quality of Liminality, it is still a great aspect of the games to be able to see what is happening on the outside, specifically what is related to the goings-on we see within the world. Seeing things about daily life is cool, such as players becoming more addicted to their digital headsets to the point they wear portable ones out in their day-to-day, but seeing specifically what the effects of things like Ida are doing to people is a great way of showing the impact of the world and how it's not just a game. Crimson Versus, the online card game application, is also on our desktop, but it's more so to edge us throughout the entirety of Volume 1, as the servers are currently down for maintenance and won't be accessible until the next entry in the series. There's an entire community forum on this topic where it's mostly just people complaining about this and explaining a bit about how the game will work when it's back up. Finally, we are able to receive and respond to emails within the game. This allows us to unlock new area words, progress the storyline, and more. Most responses are used to help raise the affection of your party members, a mechanic that gets more rewarding later on in the game series, but doesn't offer much outside of trade deals in Rebirth. Affection is represented by various colors, starting with red, the lowest, and working your way up to pink, the highest. Some characters start with higher affection levels than others, and this can be raised in a multitude of ways, from giving gifts to replying to emails and forum posts, even using favorite actions in battle for that specific character. While we can't send our own emails, we do unlock the ability to send digital greeting cards, which you collect by completing the Book of 1000. These cards are limited and, when sent, increase the affection of the character, so I personally hold on to them until I need everyone at their maximum affection in Volume 3. There's at least one other way to increase affection that we don't need to worry about for this volume. Affection is a weird system to introduce this early when it doesn't really do anything of value for the player, but it will become more important later on, so I like to think of it as getting a head start. Additionally, this is where converting your data from the original games comes into play. By doing so, you will receive emails in each volume from characters from the past series. For example, Black Rose writes an email to Kite about how life is after the events of IMOQ. There will be another consequence of this later on during the final boss battle. Haseo will receive an email from Ovan where he gives him two options, to either restart his progress in the world or give up entirely. Restarting will be full of pain and struggle, while giving up is the easy way out. Ovan is attempting to shake up Haseo for reasons currently unknown, and this is his way of manipulating him into becoming even stronger than he was previously. Again, Ovan is an enigma. His reasons for doing what he does are not explained very clearly in Roots nor Rebirth, and serve to fuel part of our desire as the player to learn what is going on. Everything here, from emails to forums, are all used to help you believe you are using a real OS. There's even loading screens for each action, which are fairly slow for the time in which this game takes place. One of .hack's strongest aspects, one of the things that makes it the most appealing, is the simulation. The idea that you are in a futuristic world and playing an MMO with other players, but you, the player, are special. You have extra features, a more crucial storyline, and can affect the game around you in ways that other players cannot. There's mysteries to solve, and the mystery bleeds out from the game into the real world, with the forums, emails, and news showing us this from time to time. When logging into the World R2, you have three options: logging into the game itself, or checking the official site or forums. This site is used to display lore surrounding the game, as well as post announcements about events, while the forums are used to discuss the game even further. The site also teaches us about all the jobs available within the game. Twin Blades are mobile classes that open enemies up via successive attacks that lead into Rangekis. Like the name suggests, they dual wield two identical blades. Blade Brandiers are a sort of simplistic warrior class that is an all-rounder. They don't seem to specialize in any specific skill, but are good for a variety of situations. Edge Punishers would be the heavier, slower, and more prevalent equivalent of Blade Brandiers, basically focusing on those different aspects of combat. They use great swords to juggle the opponent and lock them down for big damage, while eating through attacks that would knock down some of the other classes. Lord Partisans are similar to Edge Punishers in that they wield giant weapons, however they focus on piercing attacks over slashing. While they have high physical defense, their magic defense is lacking. Tribal Grapplers are the fist-fighting class and would probably be the one I played as if the world existed in real life. They are powerful and agile glass cannons as they have lower than average defense. Flick Reapers are a more crowd control inspired class as their giant scythe is designed to hit multiple enemies at once. However, they need to be in the fray to be the most effective. Steam Gunners are the ranged class and attack from a distance to keep enemies away, due to being weak in close quarters combat. Adept Rogues are the jack of all trades class and the one we play as Haseo. During the opening cutscene of the game, we can see how a player chooses which jobs they will focus on as an Adept Rogue. With 4 points to spend, and each job being worth a certain amount of points, an Adept Rogue can mix and match to gain their desired experience. However, since classes like Harvest Cleric and Shadow Warlock each cost 3 points, a player wouldn't be able to make a combination using both of these. I'll add a list of the jobs and their point cost on screen so you can get an idea of how you would select everything. The downside to being a rogue is that your weapon skills level up individually through their own use, so it takes a rogue much longer to have a similar assortment of skills in comparison to the pure job they are basing themselves off of. However, the advantage is that they end up with many more skills and versatility in the long run. Harvest Clerics are the healing and support class of the game and use staffs while casting spells. Shadow Warlocks are the combat magic class of the game and focus on offensive spells while wielding large tomes. Finally, Macabre Dancers are sort of like the Red Mage class of the game. Able to utilize both healing and offensive magic, they can both support their allies while debilitating enemies. All of the party members you can obtain will fall into one of these job categories. However, due to reasons I've explained previously, which jobs you bring along with you rarely matter. Pyros III may be better for dealing with armored opponents, but any character will have an easy enough time with that. Potentially the most useful is a Harvest Cleric since they heal you constantly, but even then it's not the end of the world if you don't have one, and many parties choose not to. Additionally, players have 2 races to choose from when creating their characters, either human or beast, and these models can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. However, due to what I assume is the limitations of the PS2, plus emulating the MMO experience of the game, many of the players we see will look very similar to one another. This is even plot relevant since Adeli looks like Shino. Yet no one looks like Haseo, no one looks like Ovan, I don't think anybody looks like Sakubo, no one looks like Pai, no one looks like Yada, etc, etc, etc. When we log back in as Haseo, he realizes that his character has been completely reset. Spotting Ovan in Makanu and wanting answers, Haseo chases after him, but runs into Syllabus and Gaspard instead, two normal players that Haseo will be interacting with a lot throughout the series, but who are not aware of the grander plotline taking place. Despite that, Syllabus and Gaspard are very important characters in terms of Haseo's development and growth, and are here to often remind him that the people he is interacting with are real, with lives, and just want to enjoy the game as you are supposed to, instead of becoming a huge, edgy loser. And yeah, Haseo is a loser. You see this throughout the entirety of Roots and a good portion of Rebirth. Even at his strongest, he gets his ass beat on multiple occasions and feels embarrassed and hostile over the fact that he lost all of his levels. He's rude and refuses to understand when he's in the wrong multiple times throughout the series, and he can't even summon his avatar when he learns he has the ability to do so. Once he can, he then abuses that power and has to be taught a lesson by force because talking to him is like interacting with a brick wall. He's also heavily abusive to Adeli, as we will see shortly. Gaspard and Syllabus believe that Haseo is a new player and attempt to help him learn more about the world the same way Ioten and Asta did, just without the PKing. However, Haseo is a much more experienced player at this point and gets annoyed when they think he is a noob. They use the word noob a lot in this game, and it's a bit hard to take it seriously in 2025, despite it being a very prevalent term back when the game was released. When I mention that GU, especially Rebirth, is rather slow, this segment always comes to mind, namely because it's almost an exact repeat of what we learned previously with Ioten and Asta, a repeat of a tutorial segment with a few extra bells and whistles here and there. Why do this? Well, the most obvious answer in my mind is that it's because that is what the story dictates. The story is having Syllabus and Gaspard teach Haseo things he already knows, and so you, the player, are going through the same experience. And while yes, this is happening in the story, does it have to? Do we really need to repeat the same steps of the tutorial so that the story can progress, or could we skip ahead to the parts that matter more? The answer seems to be that we need to experience everything Haseo does, whether that be storyline related content, side quests, or even filler just there to help you believe you are playing an MMO. Rebirth likes to give you glimpses of the extra side of the game, the hacking, the avatars, etc. But for the most part, it's all about being a semi-normal player in an MMO, and acts more as a simulation than it does as a narrative. The downside is that the game feels repetitive and can often come off as boring fairly early and often. Like, these tasks are there just for the sake of it, potentially just to elongate the experience, since the developers wanted the game to feel larger than all of IMOQ. But even with all this filler, I still don't think that ends up being the case. However, while Syllabus and Gaspard continue to teach us things we already know about, they do bring up one mechanic that Haseo may not have known existed due to the fact that he mostly plays solo. These are awakenings. This is a special mechanic that activates when the player's morale gauge is full and comes in two forms. Since we are once again learning about combat, let's fully break down all of it so we can understand how things work in GU. We've already discussed the basics of controls and experience, so let's get into the more nuanced aspects. Characters in the world have various stats, but the main ones are HP, SP, and physical/magical attack and defense. These make up how effective your character is with physical attacks and spells specifically, and these can be raised by leveling up, wearing specific gear, and using special items that permanently raise them. However, since GU is so bare bones in regards to how you build your character, or rather the need to do so, you never really need to worry about what these are. Generally speaking, you can get by throughout the entirety of the game with no difficulty just by wearing the highest level equipment you can at the time. Additionally, there are several elements in the game and pairings of them counter one another. Fire and water are counters to one another as an example. Same with wind and earth, or light and dark. Again, you wouldn't be blamed for realizing that you never thought about these elements while playing the game, as they hardly matter in terms of difficulty. In fact, that's a great way to look at this. Optimizing in GU isn't about helping you be able to surmount a challenge, it's about helping you be efficient. You can beat anything in this game with relative ease, But if you want to do it quickly and feel all powerful, that's where keeping track of these mechanics comes into play. There's no real strategy necessary outside of that. Equipment is based on 3 categories. You have your weapon, your armor piece, and your accessory. Weapons both define your attack potential as well as potentially changing your combo follow-ups, but for the most part, Haseo's role with his twin blades is to mash as much as possible to activate Rengekis. If you get knocked down in battle, you can get up quickly by pressing X or circle. X will perform a get up attack and make you wait a little bit longer before being able to act out of it, while circle will perform a quick get up and allow you to immediately begin moving and attacking again. These are mechanics of the world, which means other player characters have access to the same moves and mechanics you do, and will use them against you in the arena or when fighting PKs. Armor comes in 3 tiers of light, medium, and heavy, and each class has the ability to equip one of these. Adept rogues get to choose at the start of character development which one they would like to equip for the entirety of the game. Syllabus, as a blade brandier, can equip medium armor, while Haseo equips heavy, and a character like Adeli equips light. Finally, characters can equip accessories that often provide some form of elemental defense bonus. Items and equipment come in several rarities, with 1-star being the lowest and 5-star being the highest. Now, all of these equipment pieces can be customized at any time. Assuming they have a slot to equip a customization item, you can mix and match passive bonuses onto your gear to better help out with a given situation. However, this seems to usually be the most effective when you just raise the physical damage capability of your weapon, the physical defensive value of your armor, and attaching experience bonus items to your accessories, which is a very broken idea in an MMO, by the way. If everyone can just equip items that give a flat 10% EXP bonus with like no restrictions, that will be all anyone chooses to use until they hit the maximum level cap. A customized piece of equipment's name will change based on the customization items attached to it. You can tell the type and tier of equipment it is because it will keep the latter half of the name but change the former. Further, we can alchemize weapons, specifically in Rebirth, but we'll talk about that more once we unlock guild features. The concept of equipment customization really does help with the feeling of depth and intricacy in the game. The issue is that it falls flat due to not feeling particularly necessary or vital. And that's just a really repetitive issue within this game. There's many features that are cool in theory, but that don't actually matter. What makes features like these in a game feel so great is when they can be used to overcome something that you haven't been able to get past. A particularly dangerous or complicated boss can be defeated if you find the right combination of effects and strategy as an example, but that's never something that is needed in GU. Moving on, when starting an encounter, you can perform what is known as a surprise attack. If you can get close enough to target an enemy without being in their cone of vision, you can start the fight at an advantage by attacking them first, knocking down smaller enemies and simply dealing damage to larger ones. The amount of surprise attacks you get within the game affects your grade when you leave an area and is also used as a calculation within the Book of 1000. Later on, when we get our mount within the game, we can actually drive into enemies for a similar effect. As I mentioned earlier, characters have favorite actions, and by using these actions as Haseo in combat, you will raise their affection. However, this also raises their morale gauge and will allow you to use awakenings. The easiest way to do this is with Rengekis, since those are a universal favorite for every party member. Awakenings come in 2 flavors, and I must have missed them explaining that in GU because I forgot about it and only ever used the first one. You have Beast and Demon Awakenings to start, and you have to assign them ahead of time before activating them. Beast Awakenings cause the enemy around you to freeze up, unable to perform any actions, while making you more powerful and your attack animations faster. It's the de facto one I suggest using in Rebirth at the very least, as Demon Awakenings are very underwhelming. You just mash a button to spam a low-level spell until the effect wears off. Awakenings are a satisfying mechanic to use against an enemy, and you can build them up for use fairly easily. It does get a bit repetitive, however, as you have to watch a cutscene every time you activate it where your party shows they are getting ready to attack. Doing this over and over in an already slow game can start to feel really exhausting. Additionally, weapons and spells can have the ability to inflict various status ailments. Curse and Poison will cause you to lose SP and HP over time, while Sleep will cause you to be unable to perform any actions until hit or healed. There's also a Charm ability, but I believe it's only ever seen once in Rebirth in an arena match. There are a few other aspects of combat to bring up, but we will talk about those once we unlock our first job extension for Haseo and allow him to use Edge Punisher weapons. I've talked about it here and there, but let's clarify a bit more on fields and dungeons. Area word combinations create locations for you to explore, and it's the combination of those words that dictate if it's a field or dungeon. It will also give you information on the prevalent element, the general level of enemies found there, and how good or bad the items found there will be. It can also show you if you will find NPCs within the area and whether or not you have talked to them yet. This is important for a quest we unlock later on. There is no true goal within a dungeon or field unless it is tied to a quest line. That is except for finding the beast statue treasure or defeating a field boss if there is one. One of the more important aspects of completing these areas is your ranking. Your ranking is calculated whenever you leave an area. It takes into account how many enemies you defeated using surprise attacks, how many chim spheres you collected, how many chests you opened, and how many containers you broke open for items. With a ranking of B, A, or S, you will usually be rewarded with a new area for use, assuming it's your first time clearing an area of a specific level. Like, the word Forgotten is rewarded for getting a B to S rank on any level 2 area, but only once. This is an interesting thing to think about, since players are known to just tell one another about specific area words or combinations. If you see an area word in a forum, you unlock it in the game, and I don't believe it is explained how this works exactly. My guess is that, within the setting, while area words can be unlocked manually for the player, if another player has already unlocked it, they can share it instead, and you then do not need to unlock it yourself. So most likely, someone needs to at least unlock the word first, and then it can be shared. Chests and breakable objects are scattered throughout the fields and dungeons and offer items to the player, but you can sometimes run into trap chests that require a QTE to be performed within a specific time frame, else you get punished. Finally, as we know, fields can either be designed around beast temples or field bosses. However, dungeons can be multi-level excursions where you need to explore the area to clear a fog of war on your minimap. You can use a fairy orb item to see the full map right away, but this will only work for the current floors you are on. At the end of every dungeon is a beast statue, and the dungeons come in 2 flavors within Rebirth, those being caverns and temples. These get exceedingly repetitive as you go, even if you aren't trying to complete everything. Traveling through what feels like the same dungeon over and over again can leave you begging to escape. Both fields and dungeons sometimes require the use of chim spheres, a collectible currency that is used to power Steam-operated machines. You can collect these by kicking chims that you will find all throughout the area. Generally, in fields, you will find chims by kicking trees, but you can also find them through other various means in dungeons, whether it be through giant mushrooms, containers, minecarts, etc. Kicking a normal chim offers you 1 chim sphere, kicking a larger yellow chim offers you 5, and very rarely you may run into a king chim that will attack you. A king takes multiple hits to defeat, I believe 10, and if he hits you back, you lose chim spheres in your inventory. However, the rewards outweigh the risk as the king offers a boatload of spheres. In the original release of the game, you could only hold 99 at a time, however, which would later become 999 in last recode. The more chims you have in your inventory, the more often you are likely to be attacked by ninja chim assassins. They don't seem to offer any rewards and appear solely to punish you for hoarding spheres. You can kick them to get rid of them before they attack you, but you need to keep an eye out for black particle effects that begin to generate on your person. Assassins only appear in dungeons specifically, so you never need to worry about them in fields, although there's another danger in fields you should really keep an eye out for. The idea of chim spheres and a quest surrounding it that we will talk about later is easily one of the most annoying and tedious aspects of the game. Even if you don't want to interact with the optional side quest involving Mecha Grunty, you still need chim spheres to progress through various areas of a field and dungeon. Sometimes to activate warp pads, sometimes to unlock doors, and other times to get yourself out of a room you end up locked within as a trap. This means that while you are already making your way through repetitive, slow dungeons that feel like a grind to complete, you also tend to keep stopping to make sure you have at least 30 to 40 in your inventory in case you run into a bunch of obstacles. Okay, so we are in a dungeon with Syllabus and Gaspard. They don't believe we are the Terror of Death and are trying to teach us how to play. This is due to them being the sole members of a guild called Canard, where their purpose is to help newer players. Unfortunately, the party gets ambushed by Bordeaux and her gang of PKers, whom we saw Haseo terrorizing at the start of the game. Now level 1 again, Haseo isn't able to fight against characters so much stronger than him, but they are luckily saved by the appearance of Pi, a member of Guild Raven. Haseo doesn't realize this, but he has met Pai before. This is because Pai and Yata of Raven used to play as the characters Ender and Niobe, running the guild Tan before it shut down during the events of Roots. I suggest watching the anime for more information surrounding that. It was due to their efforts that Ovan's character was captured, leading to his disappearance. However, Ovan managed to escape for reasons we learn in the next entries. Pai manages to run Bordeaux off by claiming she summoned the help of Moontree, a guild that helps players defend themselves against PKs. It's a bluff, but it works, and she informs Haseo that he has a special power within his character that makes him dangerous, adding to the mystery. However, while interested about the power, Haseo is fairly belligerent towards Pai, calling her an old hag and insulting her incessantly in a way I don't think I'd ever consider this dude redeemed over if it was towards me. Jiu is about growth, but the way that Haseo treats those close to him is so toxic and abusive, it's hard to ever forget just how horrible of a person he was in the past, despite his changes later on. Pai is talking about Project GU from the terminal discs. Since aspects of the world were ported over to R2, the epitaphs were brought over as well. Now no longer their own independent phases, they have the ability to attach themselves to character data that they hold an affinity with. Haseo has Skaith due to his past as Sora, and we will learn later that Pai has Tarvos for reasons that aren't fully clear to us yet but are implied within the terminal disc entries. Haseo and the party leave back to Makanu, where Haseo complains about the Moontree Guild, claiming he'd rather be PK'd than saved by them. And let me ask you something, do you think that's normal? Do you think that's a valid opinion to have? Is being helped by a group dedicated to helping people wrong, does that make you feel weak and like helpless, like a loser? Is Moontree a guild to be looked down upon? Jiu often shows us that it's very easy for a community to fall into individualism and often scoff at the idea of helping one another just for the sake of it. To Haseo, accepting help is a sign of weakness, and therefore Moontree are a bunch of weaklings that need help to survive. But working together, being a community, that is the point of the world. Sure, there is PKing, but this is a social MMO. You're supposed to interact with the community and become stronger because of it. That isn't weakness, and it's an example of Haseo's immaturity that he vilified this notion. Even Adelie scolds him for this, explaining that there's no reason to hate a group dedicated to helping others, because helping others is the right thing to do, the moral good. Why hate that? In many ways, despite her coming off as immature in her own ways, Adelie understands much more about the world than Haseo and is able to find friendship and camaraderie within it. It's more her naivete that gets her in trouble. Despite his insults to the guild, Adelie seems to want to help Haseo see the good in assisting others, handing him her member address and inviting him to explore a field within the world shortly after. When you acquire a member address, you can head over to a specific tab in your email app and see the character's likes, dislikes, slogan, and affinity. It's a way of showing you aspects of their personality while keeping track of their affection levels. It's around now that you will start being invited to side quests, which you can pick up within Makanu at the quest shop. Some of these are for additional backstory elements and gaining affection with other party members, but others are for more overarching mechanics, so let's discuss all of those ones now. There are around 6 clear overarching side quests to unlock fairly early on within the game. These are the Mecha Grunty quest, the Chim Sphere quest, the Lucky Animal quest, Bickman's Flyers quest, Chaotic PK quest, and the Abyss quest. Most of these are designed around grinding different aspects of the world and tend to repeat within each volume. Most of them are more annoying than they are valuable. I love side quests in games, but when your side quest is the grind for the sake of it with minimal rewards and almost zero plot, I feel like there's rarely any point to completing them other than you are supposed to. For example, let's talk about the Mecha Grunty quest. Fields and dungeons may have a special grunty known as a Mecha Grunty within them. If an area does have a Mecha Grunty, it will always be there every time you load into that zone, even if you interacted with it already. This can make the grinding process easier, as you'll understand shortly. Essentially, we are tasked with finding and saving the Grunty by depositing Chim Spheres into it. We need to do this a whopping 50 times, and each time costs 1 additional sphere plus the amount you paid previously. So one visit costs 6, then 7, then 8, etc. You can see why this would become excessively annoying considering you can only hold a maximum of 99 at any given time. If you played the game normally and completed all side content, you would probably make it to maybe halfway, meaning you need to go out of your way just to interact with this thing. Now, Mecha Grunty gives you an item every time you help him, so you'd assume these items would progress in value and rarity as you go, but no. They give you what seem to be random basic items every time. The real reward comes from reaching certain checkpoints and talking to the professor who gives you the quest. Each time you reach a checkpoint of how many times you saved the Grunty, you can visit the professor and he'll have a progressively better reward for you, but these are very rarely amazing. Each of the quests I'm talking about are structured in this way somewhat. Chim research is another example. Collecting chim spheres and defeating unique chims like the king and assassins offer points towards filling the gauge for the questline with various checkpoints of rewards along the way. This is a quest that will likely complete automatically as you play normally, but it's probably the only one. By the way, King Chim Chims will rarely drop crowns, and I believe they can be sold to the quest giver for a monetary reward that beats selling them to a normal shop, but I never tried this. Another quest wants you to find each of the unique lucky animals and collect 50 total of them as you play. Lucky animals spawn in fields and dungeons and run away from you when seen. You can chase them down or try to sneak up on them in order to kick them. You'd think if an animal was getting chased down and kicked all the time, you wouldn't consider it lucky, but what are you gonna do? If you do kick them, they give you a reward, which can be sometimes helping out in a set amount of fights, it could be items, GP, experience, etc. There are also unlucky animals that will attack you and do something negative towards you if they hit you. You need to kick them twice before they kick you to make them go away. The type of lucky animal you find in a field or dungeon is dependent on the average level of your characters, specifically the final number in that average. If your entire party is 50, the average level would end in a 0, and you could then use a table online to surmise which leveled areas house specific lucky animals. For example, at average level 0, a gold bird will appear in a field that ends in level 9, so 9, 19, 29, etc. Meanwhile, a chimera will appear in dungeons that end in level 8. There are no missable animals, but some cannot be found with certain party averages. If you do not understand this concept, a concept that I only know by using guides online back in the day, you could have an increasingly difficult time tracking them all down. The reward for kicking 50 lucky/unlucky animals is minuscule, and the reward for getting one of each is only slightly better. And I tried to find the math surrounding this online, but I couldn't. Guides tell you the answers, but never seem to actually explain the process other than through trial and error. You can even find a calculator for it online in like a Google sheet, and if you look up how they did the equations in the cells, you know, it's just switch cases. It's just switch cases. So they don't even know the math. No one knows the math behind this. It was all figured out through trial and error. Then there's Bickman's Flyers, which may be even worse to some people, as the idea is you hand out flyers to each unique player you see in the game. Since the players that show up in fields and towns are randomized, this can get more and more difficult as time goes on. Luckily, you can use areas to try and find spots that state you haven't talked to someone, but again, is that worth it for very mediocre rewards? The PK quest is more of the same. You receive monetary rewards for saving set numbers of players from PKs. The more you save, the more GP you earn. Luckily, this has an extra elaborate aspect to it in the form of chaotic PKs, players acknowledged by CC Corp as notorious player killers that end up on a wanted list. If you find these players and defeat them, you get items and monetary rewards for doing so, finally resulting in some powerful twin blades within Volume 1. The issue is that active battle arenas are random in what they house, but an arena will always appear in the same spot within an area. So you can find an area that has an immediate battle arena and see what's inside. Sometimes it's monsters, sometimes a PK, and sometimes a chaotic PK. It's up in the air. So here is what you do. You go to an area like Delta Starting Eternity's Berserker, and I found it on Reddit. I know I said I hate Reddit. Reddit's great for Googling things, not asking the question yourself. Don't ever ask a question yourself on Reddit. You get like the worst dudes answering it for you. Here on the first island, you will find several trees to collect chim spheres, a battle arena, mecha grunty, and a lucky animal, allowing you to grind everything at once. But even then, this can still take an excessive amount of time depending on your luck. It's brutal and tedious, and nothing really seems worth acquiring from these aside from text items that are used to permanently increase your stats. GU's side content is all about the grind, just grinding for the sake of grinding so you can say you did. Even the Book of 1000 we unlock later is similar in nature, although it offers what I would consider better rewards mechanically. Unfortunately, chances are you wouldn't see the second of those two major rewards until near the very end of Rebirth. The Abyss quest is an overarching quest you can start in Rebirth that has the player visit random locations based on areas they found in the forums. Rather than accepting this at the quest board, it's more like a live MMO event that technically anyone should be able to take part in. Within it, you fight several undead bosses as you foil the work of a Vital Vista named Habuzi. Vital Vistas are another of the races in the game and are usually who we acquire our quests from. Within these events, Haseo investigates in areas he has received from rumors on the forum. At the end of each dungeon, he has to fight some undead enemies, which we learn later were siphoning his life force to summon Cernunnos? The god of death. Completing these events will culminate in the Vital Vistas summoning the god in the area where we first meet Endrance. This is the super boss of this volume, an aspect of the game that appeared in IMOQ as well. However, there's nothing super about this boss other than his size, as he's just as much a pushover as anything else in the game. However, you get one of the best armor pieces in this volume, which gives you several stat boosts at the cost of siphoning HP over time. Dubbed the Black Armor, I always wondered if this was a reference to Guts' Berserker armor in the manga Berserk. While this questline is connected to others in the new entries, I don't believe it's necessary to complete one in order to complete the others. However, I still recommend doing it, as getting the rare powerful gear, as well as being level 50 by the end of things, will give you a big lead moving into the next volume. Many of the other side quests you can acquire are more backstory rich, focusing on characters you've met on your travels, and I may touch on them briefly when I feel it matters. Another will allow Haseo to unlock his first advanced form and allow us to use Edge Punisher weapons as well, but that'll be discussed more during the arena. Back to the plot, Adley invites Haseo to visit an area with him at Delta Submissive Tragedies 100 Oaks. I believe each of the combinations she gives are meant to reflect an aspect of Adley's personality. For example, she is a submissive character dealing with a lot outside of the game, and who ends up in a tragic situation at the end of Rebirth and further into Volume 2. Another in a later volume is called Lingering Aching Love, so there does seem to be a pattern here. Adley brings Haseo to the field in order to discuss the graphics and lore surrounding the world R2, however Haseo is impatient and brash, seeing Adley as naive and a burden. She's nothing but a chore to him, yet he seems to feel compelled to spend at least some time with her due to her resemblance to Shino. It's a toxic mindset, and while Haseo may be unknowingly following Adley due to this, there's a frustration that builds up in him since Adley and Shino are not the same person. She reminds him of her visually, but the personalities are different, and this causes Haseo's lack of emotional regulation to really show itself whenever he lashes out at her. Adley comes off as the polar opposite of Haseo, even if they share more similarities than he realizes. However, it's her positive outlook, though sometimes forced, that allows Adley to keep moving forward and seem like a much healthier person than Haseo, who has fallen into a very insecure and dark place. Once they reach the beast statue, Adley seems to hear something that Haseo can't parse. She leads the party back outside to a tri-edge sign. These signs are prevalent throughout the world R2 and are believed to be made by the legendary PKer Tri-Edge. After Shino became a lost one, a sign was found in Hallgron's cathedral. Now, while the name or title-like sign may not seem that important, the naming of these markings was a small plot point during the events of Roots, and the term was coined by TAN member Tawaraya. There was enough of a focus on naming them that I believe it's meant to be a reference to .hack Sign specifically, one of the animes before Roots. For reasons currently unknown, the group is transported via the sign and sent to another lost ground, this time being the Dead World of Endeglay-Lu. I don't know why, but the emulator really began to chug whenever I was looking at this one tree, and guess what? This is where we have to fight that god I mentioned earlier, so I had to have the camera pointed away from the tree at all times, just in case you were wondering why that footage looks so silly when you see it. By the tree is a character we haven't met before, Endrance. On his shoulder is an unknown cat NPC, as well as some black dot graphical glitches he seems to be playing with. These are Ida, and we'll learn more about them in this volume, but they'll barely play a role in comparison to how prevalent they are in future volumes. As Endrance absconds, an Ida appears and Adley falls unconscious. Before Haseo can process this, the two are saved by the Epitaph user Kun, who summons the Avatar Magus to defeat it. Kun and Pi are both Epitaph users, and the first that will eventually join our party for various tasks surrounding the investigation into Ida and Tri-Edge. Both are related to the project in some way due to their past. Pi due to her brother Jun, who created the terminal disk entries we talked about earlier, and Kun because he was a lost one in IMOQ. Back during the events of the original games, within the OVA Liminality, Mai Minase and her boyfriend Tomonari Kasumi were playing the world before running into Skaith. Both collapsed, but Mai managed to awaken while Tomonori ended up in a coma. His character Sieg makes an appearance in-game after Kite manages to save everyone. Eventually, Mai breaks up with Tomonori after everything that had happened, apparently due to his immaturity, and he would later go on to make the character Kun in GU. Potentially due to being a lost one in IMOQ, this would explain why he had an affinity towards one of the avatars. Adley wakes up, not understanding what happened, and Kun informs Haseo that what he saw him use was an avatar, and that Haseo can use one as well. He invites Haseo to visit the guild Raven, as Yata, guildmaster and leader of Project GU, wants to talk to him. Haseo visits the guild and enters into an administrative area known as the Serpent of Lore, which seems to be used to monitor players and locations within the world. Yata is an administrator for CC Corp and the Epitaph user of Fidhel. He was the character Wise Man in IMOQ at the age of 12 and worked as a sort of information broker for Kite before joining his party/group known as the Dot Hackers. Now 19 and using the PC character Niobe and Roots, Yata ran the guild Tan alongside Pi/Ender and Tawaraya. Due to the events at Roots, Niobe and Ender had to ditch their PCs and continue investigating as Yata and Pi, a fact that I think Haseo never learns about. Yata informs Haseo that he has been watching him for some time using the Serpent of Lore. Since Haseo is a chosen one or candidate of the Epitaph users, Yata is seeking his assistance in investigating Ida and Tri-Edge. He teaches Haseo about data drain, the effect that reverted Haseo back to level 1. Seeking Haseo's help, he offers to help him awaken his power as long as Haseo assists them in return. He does this by dangling the fact that it would allow him to fight Tri-Edge, potentially saving Shino and the other lost ones. As belligerent as ever, Haseo chastises Yata for spying on him and suggests that it is their fault Shino fell into a coma. Yata refutes this, blaming Tri-Edge. Pi, unhappy with Haseo's personality, pleads that it is too dangerous for someone like him to have this kind of power. However, since he agreed to help out, Pi and Kun have to try and show Haseo how to summon his avatar. They go to a field to fight mobs, but Haseo is unable to produce anything. Frustrated and borderline throwing a tantrum, Pi tells him it's pointless to even consider him a member if he can't summon his avatar. Haseo blames them for teaching him poorly since nothing is ever his fault and they part ways for now. Shortly before this, Haseo is asked by Gaspard and Syllabus to help out with their guild shop. It's here that Haseo meets Sakubo for the first time, a PC who is played by a brother and sister, apparently. Saku is the loud, brash sister, and Bo is the younger, more timid brother. Haseo helps Bo out by selling him an item at a discount. Since he ran the shop so well and showed he was willing to help out another player, Syllabus and Gaspard ask him to become their guild leader as Syllabus isn't up for it. We also learn that Kun was the original guildmaster, but had to leave due to unlocking his power as a chosen one. The concept of a guild is both an important social aspect within the setting, but also mechanically to us playing the game. To first unlock the right to be a guildmaster, Haseo needs to complete a test for his grunty. Every guildmaster gets a grunty that is designed to look like them. However, all the grunties in this series wear hats, and for some reason Haseo's doesn't. Known as Death Grunty, it seems to pull from Haseo's personality slightly and is overly rude, stubborn, snarky. Although Syllabus does mention that it was similar for him, so who knows. To complete the test, Haseo has to go meet several other guild grunties that are spread out across Makanu. Once he does, he'll get an item from them. With all items, he can report back to the Death Grunty, but he needs to do one more thing. He needs to add an item to the guild shop and sell it. Sakubo, being grateful for Haseo's help earlier, buys the item, allowing Haseo to officially become the guildmaster of Canard. Players in the world can be part of multiple guilds, but only a guildmaster of one. This is how Haseo is able to run Canard while being part of Raven. As a guildmaster, he also gets access to the Steam Bike, which is a mount that can be used in towns and on the field. Not especially crucial since you can fast travel within Makanu, but a nice thing to have to speed up a very slow game. It's suggested that the guildmaster is who gets access to the mount, which is a crazy concept. But later on, when races unlock in further volumes, non-guildmasters seem to have record times, suggesting maybe everyone can use a steam bike at some point. Could you imagine playing an MMO? Could you imagine playing an MMO where only the guildmaster gets a mount? Everyone would have their own guild at some point just for efficiency's sake. The steam bike is also used to perform surprise attacks against enemies, where you crash into them before they notice you. It's similar to the normal surprise attack, but harder to perform in my opinion, just due to the controls of the bike being fairly clunky in nature. Each guild has a headquarters known as an at-home, where guild members can congregate and access the various features the guild has to offer. We'll see later that the bigger and more accomplished a guild becomes, the larger an at-home a guild can have/be awarded. Within Rebirth, we will visit the special guild homes of Kestrel and Moontree. There's a fair amount that we can do within a guild once we complete the certification, the main aspects being we can use guild storage and run the guild shop. Guild storage is crucial in a game like GU because the limitations on inventory are incredibly frustrating. You may only hold 30 unique items and 30 unique pieces of equipment at any given time, and stacks of items tend to only go up to 50. On top of that, equipment can't even be stacked, so you're really screwed over there. This isn't a lot, right, in the grand scheme of things, so being able to store these items somewhere else in case you want to use them at a later date is a necessity in order to keep your inventory manageable when out grinding an area. Otherwise, you will be constantly asked if you want to destroy one item to make room for another. This was most likely due to limitations on the PS2, but certain upgrades to your guild allow you to expand the guild storage, so who knows. Last Recode seemed to fix this by increasing the inventory capacity along with chim spheres. Meanwhile, the guild shop is used to sell items at a higher price than you could get them for from NPC vendors. Emulating player-ran markets, you can put multiple stacks of items or singular equipment up for sale with a maximum of 5 slots available before being upgraded to 7 in this entry. You can access the shop either from the Death Grunty or from Gaspard if he is currently available. However, since this is an MMO and people have lives, Gaspard will not always be around for this. This causes a bit of an issue for collecting your profits sometimes, as the only way to do so is to have them handed to you by Gaspard. While you can access the shop, you can't access the profits unless he is available. The shop is meant to be an overtime type of sale. You get more for your items, but it takes time to sell them, at least in theory. In reality, going into areas and completing content seems to usually be enough for you to return and find everything you put up has sold. It's not very realistic, but many of the simulation aspects of this MMO rarely are. It's more to give you a taste of the MMO life without the actual downsides of selling to real players. Hoping things sell, beating other players' prices, etc. That would be a cool game in itself actually. A fake MMO game where your whole goal is to work the player markets by running a trade guild. Someone make that for me, please, actually. I would love that. Does that exist? I'm not talking about Recettear. I'm not talking about where you have to go into the dungeon yourself. I don't want to do that. I want to just be selling stuff. We can hire people to get us stuff, but I want to just be selling stuff. Players that are members of guilds have the ability to alchemize their weapons. Since you will run into repeats of equipment you already have, you can now sacrifice them to upgrade others. If you have 2 of the same twin blades as an example, you can alchemize one into the other to create a +1 weapon for a small GP fee. You can continue doing this up to +5. Items of higher levels cannot be alchemized by those of lower ones, unless you manage to get that lower weapon to +5. Then it can be used to upgrade a higher tier weapon to +1. Or maybe past +1, but it can only be used once as a +5 and then it gets destroyed. The effect of alchemizing weapons in Rebirth is a small percentage bonus to the weapon's damage per upgrade. This starts with a 5% damage boost and can go up to 25%, which is fairly hefty. Especially for weapons like twin blades. Alchemy will be expanded on throughout the series, but at the moment it's both fairly cheap and easy to access, and helps give you that extra edge in battles until you can upgrade to the next tier since equipment is locked based on level requirements. Not that you really need it. Alchemy is cool in theory, but is hardly necessary. Guilds have additional upgrades and features, but how do we go about unlocking those? Well, we need to talk about the Book of 1000 and the Ryu books within them. In the original series, IMOQ, Kite gained access to the Ryu books thanks to an item given to him by Aura at the beginning of the game. Multiple Ryu books would be unlocked as Kite used his data drain ability, and each of them kept track of various in-game player statistics, such as chests open, time played, etc. By increasing these numbers, Kite would upgrade the books and unlock various rewards for doing so. Now, Ryu books have become a main element of the World R2 that all players have access to. By speaking to your guild's Grunty, he will show you each of 8 books, and by completing various tasks, you will fill the book's gauge until it ranks up. Once each book reaches the same rank, with 3 being the max in Rebirth, your guild will rank up as well, offering expansion opportunities. So if I get one book to rank 3, but all books to rank 2, my guild will hit rank 2. If I then get everything to rank 3, my guild will hit rank 3 as well. For the most part, completing tasks in the book offers points that will fill your gauge. Book 1 focuses on battles and rewards points for the amount of battles won, surprise attacks performed, and the amount of Rangekis and Awakenings. But you can do these in any amount you desire in order to hit rank 3, and the more you get done in Volume 1, the more that will carry over into Volume 2, making ranking up even faster. Many of these books can be completed easily just by playing the game and completing side content. Ryu Book 1 has the battles, and the other books focus on other aspects. Ryu Book 2 focuses on party member interactions and rewards points for trades with party members specifically, the number of times you formed a party, amount of gifts given, and the amount those gifts are worth. Ryu Book 3 focuses on treasure, rewarding you for Beast Temple treasures obtained, treasure boxes opened, trap boxes opened, and objects that have been destroyed. Ryu Book 4 is all about item collection. Points are awarded based on finding at least one of every item in the game. You don't need to keep them, but you do need to at least have them in your possession at some point. Customized items only count for the base equipment that has been customized, otherwise the amount of item combinations to collect would be insane. It keeps track of weapons, armor, accessories, and items. Just as a note, you can hit the max rank of 3 in Rebirth without finding every item. I hit rank 3 and I was still missing 3 to 4 secret accessories that you can sometimes randomly purchase from other guild shops. Ryu Book 5 keeps track of playtime, amount of fields visited, amount of temple dungeons, and amount of cave dungeons. Book 6 focuses on the amount of matches in the arena, amount of counterattacks performed in an arena match, and the amount of WP accrued, which is a ranking system in the arena. You do not need to be max rank in WP specifically in order to complete this though. Ryu Book 7 is a list of every monster type and subtype in the game, and you also don't need to finish this to hit max rank. The final book, Ryu Book 8, focuses on your Steam bike and accounts for drive time within the game and the amount of crashes performed. This is probably one of the more boring ones to raise if you haven't been using the bike regularly. However, if you have, you can get a big head start on the next volumes. These books are around the same level as the side quests with the Vistas I mentioned previously that feel as though they are a grind just for the sake of it. While many will be fully ranked up at the end of the game, you may find yourself going out of your way for others, such as with the arena or with the item collection, or potentially like customization items that you need to trade for, but it's on armor already, so you might not know that that armor has the customization item, so you need to trade for the armor, take off the customization item, and then see that you have it. And if you don't know how to find certain items within the game, as some are through trades as an example, it can be particularly grueling trying to get everything to max rank by the end. Luckily, the rewards feel a little more worth it in comparison to the side quests we picked up earlier. Namely, when you hit certain checkpoints within a rank, you can get an assortment of background music and wallpapers for your desktop, as well as unlock a gallery of movies that are all rendered scenes/FMVs we watch throughout the storyline. So it's partially a meta reward outside of the scope of the game's universe, but still very nice to have. You additionally earn greeting cards this way, which can be sent to party members to raise their affection and are best held onto until you know you need to do that for someone. Additionally, hitting rank 2 in your guild will allow you to pay to expand your storage and shop. This means you'll be able to sell 7 items at a time and store even more unique items in your storage. The third rank you'll probably hit near the end of the game, if not in the post-game of Volume 1, and allows you to access your storage at gate platforms within fields and dungeons, meaning you don't have to leave and come back if your inventory ends up full, a very useful upgrade that you'll make more use of in Volume 2 and 3. Guilds as a concept are crucial to a social MMO's experience, but while it's nice to have as a concept, the actual idea of running a guild is hardly present within Rebirth. Our guild is solely there to act as features to make Haseo's life easier, which is a bit sad. Canard is supposed to be about helping newer players, yet there is no ability for us to recruit or help others outside of the story. The only new member we get at the moment is Adalie because of events in the storyline. Really, there's a lot missing in terms of guild mechanics, and while we get new aspects of the current ones, such as alchemy being used for armor and accessories, there's not much else for us to do within our guild other than continue to rank it up. After the events with the guild, Haseo gets invited to check out an upcoming arena match alongside Syllabus and Gaspard. The match is a team versus the current Palace Emperor, Endurance. Arena matches are battles between two parties with 1 to 3 members each. Having fewer members puts you at a disadvantage, but this hasn't stopped Endurance from climbing the ranks and becoming Emperor, which has earned him quite the reputation. Arena matches are hosted on the Omega server, Lumina Cloth, which is designed specifically for the arena and has no areas to explore. On one end is where you register for and spectate matches, and the other is the guild home of Ecolo that only allows current emperors to be members. There are 3 palaces within the world R2. They are the Demon, Holy, and Sage palaces, respectively, and each are focused on players within a 50 level range. Demon is for 1 to 50, Holy for 51 to 100, and Sage for 101 to 150. Each of these palaces has a ranking that is determined by a currency known as WP. By earning WP and reaching the top of the rankings, you earn the right to enter upcoming tournaments. The winner of said tournament has the right to fight the Emperor for their title, which gives you the highest rank out of anyone in the palace regardless of your current WP amount. As Haseo witnesses, the reason Endurance is so talented within the arena is due to him summoning his avatar during the battle, putting the lives of his opponents in danger. Only other Epitaph users have the ability to see avatars, so many spectators just assume Endurance is using a secret skill that other players don't know about. However, the previous Emperor, Alcade, believes that Endurance is cheating and will later believe the same of Haseo. Just as a quick note into the development of the game, the arena used to have a spectator mode for the player, but it was later scrapped as it was considered too boring. I don't know if I agree with that decision, since I always liked watching matches in Oblivion, but I digress. After the match, Haseo runs into Ovan and demands an explanation for what happened against Triedge. Ovan doesn't really answer anything, but seems to goad Haseo into continuing to grow stronger, learning to unlock his powers. It seems that Ovan is focused on the growth of Haseo's character and wants to see him unlock his avatar for reasons unknown. Why Ovan seems to know about the avatar is not explained at this point in the story. Haseo then runs into the sister half of Sakubo, Saku. She gets aggressive against Haseo as she is hyper-defensive of and in love with Endurance. Endurance appears briefly through an Ida portal of some sort. He mocks Haseo's desire to become more powerful since he can't use his avatar. This seems to set something off in Haseo, and he makes it his goal to defeat Endurance to prove himself, just as Ovan seemed to want. Haseo recruits Syllabus to join his arena team, but not Gaspard as he isn't comfortable with it. Gaspard represents another aspect of innocence when playing online MMOs. To him, these games are meant to be fun, and the constant harassment of PKers and the internal politics of the world really start to get to him later as he ends up targeted by Bordeaux and her group of lackeys. Syllabus suggests a Harvest Cleric to round out the team since he is a Blade Brandier, and the only one they can think of inviting is Adalie, much to Haseo's chagrin. Coincidentally, Adalie invites him to another area to explore and level up within, this time being Delta Blurry Obsessive Slacker. During their excursion, Haseo is constantly unable to ask Adalie to join them. He's constantly agitated with her innocence and the way she plays the world, something she can tell because he's awful at hiding it. Adalie tries to persevere and see the good in both the world and Haseo, but his constant belittling and attempts to break her down will start to get to her as we continue. Similar to Gaspard, Adalie plays as a form of escape and to have fun. However, this escapism is in itself Adalie's own form of toxic coping mechanism, and that'll be explored more in Reminisce. Adalie explains that she doesn't play the world to beat other people or to be the best. She thinks those concepts aren't fun nor for her. Asking Haseo if that's what he likes, she explains that she has never had the chance to win anything in her life, so it's difficult for her to understand Haseo's mindset. Adalie's life seems to experience solely loss, and that pain is something she tries to avoid. Entering the arena or competing in anything would only leave her open to further suffering. Due to the events in Adalie's life, she's too scared to try those aspects of the game. She makes a good point during this conversation. What is the point of defeating others just to show off your own power? Haseo doesn't want to engage in competition, he wants to defeat others, to be stronger than them. He doesn't care how he does that, and even though Adalie doesn't want to compete at all, she can see that Haseo is on the complete other end of the spectrum. Both characters are stuck in their own ways. Adelie explains that she thinks it's important to slow down in games like this and to stop from time to time, to metaphorically smell the flowers. It's healthier that way in her eyes. Voicing this to Haseo seems to be his last straw. Unable to understand Adelie, plus her resemblance to Shino, he finally lets loose, speaking his mind about how he feels about Adelie.
Slow down? Stop and to enjoy? It's impossible! I can't take this anymore! What are you, an idiot? All of this! All of this! All of this! Is nothing more than a bunch of computer data! It's just a bunch of fake stuff made by slapping textures on top of polygons! How the hell do you find any part of this made-up world beautiful?
Haseo!
There's only one thing that's real about this world, and that's us, the players! Getting stronger and defeating your opponent. Those are the ways that all of us keep connected. That's the way this game is played! What's wrong with that, huh? Answer me! Tell me, what's wrong with that? Leave.
Huh?
Damn, you're so irritating! Don't show your face again! Damn it! Don't go telling me crap like slow down with Shino's face.
I think it's obvious that Haseo doesn't mean everything he is saying here, but that doesn't matter, does it? His lack of emotional regulation, his unwillingness to understand Adelie, has bottled up and been unleashed in an abusive rant that treats Adelie like she's nothing more than an annoyance to him. Someone he neither respects nor likes. He can't stand being around Adelie for several reasons, but does that mean her attempts to get to know him and show him another side of the world are worthy of this hatred towards her, this abuse? Make no mistake, this would be the final straw for many people against Haseo. You may even expect it to be for Adelie, who Haseo made run away from his presence by being so vile, so childish. It's just another example of how Haseo has yet to learn anything. He lacks compassion, he lacks nuance, he is a child. And while Adelie and the others don't know what he is currently going through, what is at stake, he is unable to recognize that fact. Imagine you were saving the world or some people by playing an MMO of all things, but no one around you understood that because they haven't been informed. Do you think it's justified to get that angry at them for wanting you to try playing the game normally? Adelie doesn't know what is going on in Haseo's head. She's trying to understand him, and she is getting punished for doing so. Haseo has to relay the bad news to Syllabus that he wasn't able to recruit Adelie. Syllabus then makes a wanted ad on the forums looking for a cleric to join their team. One person replies, but asks Haseo to come alone in order to talk about it in some random area. Clearly a trap, Haseo travels there anyway and ends up running into Bordeaux, who is itching to PK him. However, Adelie saw Bordeaux follow after Haseo as he left the area and asked Sakaki and Matsu of Moontree to save him.
Nope, not what happens. I don't know why I said that's what happened. Adelie is told by Bo of Sakubo that it was his sister setting up an ambush for Haseo, and that's why she tells Sakaki. I don't know where I got that other part from.
Still feeling bitter or embarrassed about their last talk, and feeling small due to having to be saved, Haseo once again suggests that he didn't ask for any help and refuses to be grateful. Despite this, a glutton for punishment, Adelie continues to try and understand Haseo, offering to join him in the arena so she can experience the taste of victory at least once. So we have a team, and we can finally start competing within the arena. Before that, Haseo sees a post on a rumor board calling out Tri-Edge by the leader of Project GU. Thinking this is Yada, Haseo goes to the cathedral to see what is up, only to be met with Pyros III. Pyros is a returning character from IMOQ, an eccentric character that helped Kite during the events that transpired in the World R1. Originally a heavy axeman, he has now returned to the World R2 as a Lord Partisan and has a bone to pick with whoever is causing the graphical glitches. The reason for this is because Pyros runs the guild Graphics Unbelievable, hence Project GU, and holds a high affinity towards the work that goes into making the games look the way they do. So this was all just a misunderstanding. He tries to hide this fact, but Pyros is actually the lead for the graphical team within the World R2. Seeing his work be defaced is getting to him, and he wants to catch Tri-Edge in order to put a stop to it. Offline, Pyros' name is Hiroshi Matsuyama. If you've been paying attention, you'd know this is the name of the president of CC2, and one of the creators of .hack in real life. He even has his own theme song sung by Hiroshi. I believe it was often thought that there was no Pyros II, however Matsuyama did seem to have a second character during an event known as the Chup Chop case, and is brought up in .hack Link, the next major game after GU. Anyway, the arena. You need to win battles within the arena to earn WP, and you need to be within the top 10 of the WP rankings to enter the tournament that will allow you to challenge the Palace Emperor. In order to keep the arena somewhat fair within the setting of the game, players cannot use items and all healing spells are halved in effectiveness. If you asked me, I don't think a cleric is needed at all the majority of the time, but if things ever did get out of hand, it's good to have Adeli there as a failsafe. Since this is PvP, players have the same abilities that you do, such as Rengekis and the like. This creates counterattack opportunities. Even if you haven't put the enemy into a Rengeki state, if you see that they are about to use a skill trigger, you can interrupt it with your own to perform a counterattack. This is important for your rating at the end of a match. Additionally, you only need to beat the leader of a team to win, so you can ignore the other players for the most part, although that may make the fight more difficult and can also hinder your rating. There's two ways to do this. You can enter a limit battle, which is a singular battle against an available team of your choosing, and WP rewards will be based on the difference between your team's level and theirs. Alternatively, and more efficiently in my opinion, you can take part in survival battles where you don't get to choose which team you fight and fight several in a row, regaining HP and SP based on how fast you defeat them. You can fight enemies that are higher in level than you or lower, and the initial WP reward is still based on that. Once all battles are completed and WP is tallied up, you will earn a bonus based on your ranking. The ranking is dictated by how fast you were, how many counters you got off and your highest combo, and the amount of players defeated. So even though you will probably be able to steamroll most of these leaders on their teams, you should still consider taking out the cleric and other weaker competitors to help with your rating, thus earning you more WP after everything is said and done. I say this in almost every video that has one, but every game should have an arena. Every RPG at the very least. Arenas are a staple of the RPG experience and are a great way to allow players to feel a sense of competition while also working through trials for greater rewards. I love the concept of difficult bosses and content being locked behind the trials of completing an arena, and while GU doesn't do that, at least not in Rebirth really, it's still a net positive to have within the game. However, the arena is essentially the main plot point of Rebirth moving forward. Yes, we are investigating Ida and looking for Tri-Edge, but the majority of the plot is now going to focus here during the tournament and take up an exceptional amount of the storyline. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's an aspect of what I mentioned earlier. For the most part, Rebirth wants to focus on the normality of MMOs, rather than the special nature of Haseo and his team. That aspect is there, but it only shows up after a long build-up of gameplay and storyline and will only become more prevalent in later volumes. During the grinding process, we run into several interruptions. For one, the reason Bordeaux was even after us earlier is because someone hired her to cause problems. This turns out to be the Saku side of Sakubo, who is so obsessed with Endurance that she wants to bully us into not competing. We also get interrupted from the WP grind when we meet the enigmatic Antares PC, who decides to take us under his wing as his protege. Haseo doesn't take him very seriously at first, but Antares suggests that Haseo proves himself by clearing a specific area. By goading Haseo and looking down on him, he easily manipulates him into taking on said area. The dungeon we end up in is nothing like what we have seen before. It's a single floor, but an incredibly large one, and you traverse it using warp points without knowing exactly where they go. It's awful, but Antares sends us a series of short mails in order to help guide us along the path. Why is he helping us? We learn about it later, but it won't be explained in Volume 1. Yeah, there's a lot of that in this series, I'm sorry. At the end of the dungeon, Antares is there to greet the party. He doesn't give anything to Haseo for completing the task and warps out. After some more grinding in the arena, Sakubo shows up to taunt Haseo and tells him he doesn't realize people are suffering due to his actions. Soon after, we get an email from Syllabus to come by the guild shop ASAP. We learn that Bordeaux has been intimidating people and not buying things from Kennard's shop, and this has really put a damper on Gaspard's experience. This is what I was talking about earlier. Gaspard doesn't play the games to compete with or inhibit others, he just wants to run the guild shop and help new players. The one thing he does compete in is Crimson Versus, the online card game, and we learn in this volume that he is one of the best out there. Regardless, Gaspard is on the verge of quitting the world since this game just isn't fun for him at the moment. Kun, being the previous guildmaster of Kennard, feels it is his responsibility to meet with Gabi, the guildmaster of Kestrel, as this is the guild Bordeaux is part of. Haseo tags along, and this is our first time visiting the at-home of a large guild. These areas are so large that they have their own area word combinations and are accessed via the Chaos Gate. Each large guild home is built by CC Corp as a reward for a guild's progress in ranking up and growing. Kestrel is something like 5,000 people strong, which is an insane number for a single guild in pretty much any MMO. They're each unique in theme, with Gabi's seemingly a giant arena or coliseum, maybe? Bordeaux and Haseo get in a bit of a spat before Gabi intervenes. A Beastman character, Gabi is considered to be incredibly powerful, so powerful that Haseo couldn't even tell he moved from one location to another. However, Gabi is incredibly carefree in nature. When Kun sends him an email explaining the issue with Kennard, Gabi explains that it is his policy to not read emails more than 3 lines long. Haseo demands from Gabi that he rein in Bordeaux and the rest as they are stalking and bullying his friends. However, it's in Gabi's mind that anyone should be able to do what they want as long as it falls within the rules of the game. PKers can PK, and PKKers can PKK. If you don't want to deal with it, then run away. In a way, he's correct. The game allows this to happen, so why wouldn't they do it? However, there are definitely aspects that are going too far in my eyes. Stalking and harassing players in a game they paid for is not the same as just finding individuals in a dungeon and killing them. Many MMOs actually have policies against these kinds of actions. Despite Gabi saying anything goes, he claims he doesn't allow for boredom. Simply bullying someone over and over again isn't exhilarating, and Gabi only likes action and excitement. Bordeaux agrees to make a bet with Haseo to shake things up. If he beats her in the upcoming tournament, she will leave the guild alone. As this is a promise, something Gabi takes very seriously, he threatens to kick her out of the guild if she fails. Kun implies that he and Gabi know one another, and we learn that Kun used to not only be a member of Kestrel, but its assistant guildmaster as well. Kun left due to Gabi and differences of opinion in how the guild should be managed. With Gabi out of the way, Haseo needs to get ready for his first tournament fight, but an email suggests that the job extension event is finally underway. Unlike your typical MMO, a class like an Adept Rogue can't ascend jobs just by completing quests and leveling up. They need to wait for the job extension event to go live and then complete a specific quest before the event ends. By completing a job extension, Haseo could unlock the Edge Punisher class, and this could give him a big advantage going into the first tournament battle. To complete the quest, Haseo has to head into a dungeon and reach the beast statue in order to acquire a symbol. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, this is the same dungeon Antares sent Haseo and the party to earlier with all the warp platforms. Suggesting that Antares is more wise and experienced than he lets on, it seems he did help Haseo out by showing him the route through the dungeon with his party before he would have to go and complete it solo. Haseo completes the dungeon with ease and unlocks his new job extension, changing the look of his player model. This is one of those things designed for you to look forward to as you continue to play. We have seen Haseo with all of his jobs unlocked when he was the Terror of Death, and now we are working our way up to that by advancing our jobs. Job advancements are a staple to many RPGs and MMOs. Think Ragnarok Online if you ever played that before. It's one of the best feelings in a game to advance your class to something more powerful. I remember being so excited to do this when I used to play the old Fire Emblem games on the Game Boy Advance that I never realized I should wait to fully level up my units to their max before doing so. Needless to say, I had a harder time than was necessary in those games when I was younger. Not only will Haseo get more abilities, but we now know that he will unlock new visual forms as well. And this is reflected on the box art of Reminisce. But what is this fourth form we see on the cover of Redemption? So what does job extension let us do anyway? For the most part, it's not as great as it seems, at least initially. It's fairly limited within Rebirth as we can't switch weapons on the fly like we see Haseo do in one of the opening cutscenes. Instead, we need to select a weapon before a battle in order to use it. Additionally, you need to level up weapon types individually, so Twin Blade levels don't carry over into Edge Punisher levels. Your main character level stays the same, but you can't use as many skills on an Edge Punisher weapon as you could on a Twin Blade, at least initially. It's both disappointing and confusing. We see that Haseo can switch on the fly in his final form, yet we aren't able to do the same within the actual gameplay. Why is that? Well, there's an extra mechanic that unlocks in the next volume once we have all of our jobs unlocked, and weapon switching doesn't become available until then. However, that isn't very clear, so you may be left wanting once you unlock the Edge Punisher job, and assume that this is what it will always be like. And while the change of pace is nice, I found the use of Edge Punisher weapons, while effective, left a lot to be desired. Unlike Twin Blades, this is a slow, heavy-hitting weapon. The main benefit aside from damage is that you can often hit enemies while they are still on the ground, preventing many from being able to take any actions. Additionally, while not meant for AoE, it's so big that you may be able to hit multiple enemies at the same time easier than Twin Blades. However, the act of using the weapon itself is fairly basic. You attack once and then need to hold and charge the follow-up. That's it. That's the weapon. That's what you will be doing constantly on top of skill triggers over and over again. There's no nuance or variety to it. Sure, you can say the same of Twin Blades as you are mostly just mashing, but different Twin Blades at least have different finishers. Unless I missed it, the Edge Punisher weapons all seem to act the same, so that's a disappointment. You still have a generic charge attack as well, but the reasons to use that feel few and far between. The main reason you'll want to use this weapon is more apparent when you unlock the 3rd or 4th skill trigger for it, Armor Break. Edge Punishers and Lord Partisans are designed to deal with specific armored enemy types. Certain enemies take very little damage until you whittle down their armor gauge with attacks. Once done, an aspect of their armor explodes off the model and you can start dealing damage normal to them. However, there is a brief period during this transition where they are invulnerable to all attacks, so you may whiff on a skill trigger if you are too eager. Armored enemies do not add much to the experience. They feel as though they are there just to slow things down even further, since after you get through the armor, these enemies can still have boatloads of HP to deal with. It'd be different if the armor was their main HP gauge at that point. You destroy that and then they quickly crumble, but that isn't how things go. More interesting are certain flying enemies, as they are hard to reach until you remove their own sort of armor gauge. Then they fall to the ground and are much easier to deal with. The only thing there about armored enemies is that they have essentially 2 HP bars, and while the Edge Punisher may be better at dealing with this, the Twin Blade can do it just fine from what I've seen. So you are really just fighting an extra tanky enemy for no reason nor reward. With our new job extension unlocked, we can finally participate in our first arena tournament match. And once again, we have an audience here to witness everything. For a video game, these matches are scheduled and set up very professionally, even coming with a dedicated announcer. For the tournament, each match will have a guest co-announcer as well, usually related to the current plot point. This time is Gabi, as he has come to witness Bordeaux versus Haseo. Then it'll be Zelkova, I think Yada, and even Ovan, which is really weird. The game does that thing I hate where you clearly are throttling the enemy team, but you then lose in a cutscene. If you want me to believe I'm getting my ass beat, just make the enemies that powerful in the actual gameplay. Otherwise, it is an odd contrast to what we have experienced as the player. Regardless, Haseo is losing and Bordeaux is taunting him. Realizing that if he can't get more powerful, he can't protect anyone, especially people like Gaspard, Adelie, and Shino, it seems to be the trigger that allows Skaith to find Haseo and activate, allowing him to summon his avatar. However, avatars are best used when fighting anomalies like Ida or against other avatars. Using them against people could turn them into lost ones similar to Shino. Sure enough, we can see in a news report after the fight that Bordeaux's player was temporarily unconscious in the hospital due to Haseo's actions. Kun is furious with this development. He better than anyone understands what data drain is capable of and what kind of responsibility it is to have an avatar. Having been a lost one himself, there's an understanding of just how dangerous these powers are and how they can harm a regular player like Bordeaux. However, when he tries to scold Haseo about it, Haseo doesn't seem to care. Now that he has his power, nothing else matters. Power is all that matters to him. The power to defeat Tri-Edge, to protect people. He says he wants to protect those around him, but he seems almost drunk on his new ability. Conceited and unwilling to listen as we would expect from him, when things don't go Haseo's way, he breaks down and lashes out, and when they do, he thinks he's the king of the world. These extremes, the inability to find a middle ground, to be consistently empathetic and understanding, continue to showcase his immaturity within Rebirth and explain why so many probably bounced off of this entry. When a game has a character that experiences growth, that changes, that growth usually happens within a singular entry. We're used to experiencing the path of our protagonist from start to finish. And while Haseo will learn some lessons here and there, it's the later volumes that really begin to mold him into someone greater. Since Rebirth starts and ends with Haseo being, a brat, it's difficult to relate to him or like him, so I understand those criticisms. Haseo can't, or rather refuses, to understand Kun's perspective. He doesn't understand the dangers of an avatar or the pain they can cause since he lost his memories as Sora. Despite his bad attitude, Yada doesn't seem to care and invites Haseo back to the Serpent of Lore so he can assign Pi into training him to fight against Ida. Ida are data anomalies within the world, and how they came to be isn't as well documented as something like Aura. We don't really get much information on them in this entry anyway, and they play more as a mysterious force of nature within the world. The black dots that precede Ida seem to house data anomaly creatures that need to be defeated due to Ida being aggressive towards player characters and humans in general. Pi takes us to a dungeon, and this is our first foray into Avatar battles, so it's time to discuss what was one of the coolest aspects of the game growing up. An Epitaph user can summon their avatar in order to fight, but we as players will primarily be using this to fight against Ida and other avatars. During these battles, you find yourself controlling Skaith, floating within an arena of digital space. You can move freely side to side or forwards and backwards. Skaith also has a dash that allows you to move quickly in any direction. For attacks, you have both melee and ranged options, and the idea is that you pelt the enemy with ranged attacks until they are stunned, which enhances the damage of your melee attacks. You essentially rinse and repeat this combo over and over again until the enemy is dead. If that sounds kind of simplistic and boring, it is. The presentation, especially when I was younger, always wowed me, but the core mechanics of the fights don't really offer anything different between avatars and Ida. The biggest aspect of variety is that enemies have their own movesets, so you'll either be dodging projectiles or knocking them away with melee attacks. Then you stun the enemy and attack them. These fights are heavily reminiscent in atmosphere to the battles against the phases in IMOQ, namely that they have bullshit, undodgeable cutscene heavy attacks they can use periodically. However, while these were a severe issue in the original games and often required you to quickly heal and buff yourself to deal with them, this is not the case in GU. Instead, we usually take a little damage, maybe a temporary debuff, and then we are back on our way to destroying these things. Fighting Ida is easy enough, at least for now. We run into the same form of Ida, titled Anna, multiple times throughout the dungeon, so we can get used to the mechanics before the upcoming boss battle against an avatar. Near the end of the dungeon, Haseo and Pi run into Zelkova, the leader of Moontree, and one of his captains, Kaede. If you're thinking Zelkova's PC looks a little weird in comparison to other humanoid characters, you'd be right, but I don't think it's fully explained until the extra 4th chapter in the remaster of all things. Pi moves to save Zelkova from some Ida, but ends up getting infected in the process. This forces out her avatar Tarvos, and she tells Haseo to go get help. However, wanting to prove himself, Haseo uses his new power to attempt to save Pi. Fights against avatars are the most involved within Rebirth, namely due to all of the special attacks they come with that you have to dodge or knock away. That's not really a difficult process, however, and you'll mostly be able to just brute force your way through these before you take enough damage to lose, even during the final boss. The biggest difference is that avatars can data drain. This is also undodgeable and forces you to mash the buttons on your controller to escape while taking damage over time. But that's all it really is, and all it does is elongate these already lengthy fights that seem to drag on and on. When you whittle down the enemy's HP to 0, you'll perform a Protect Break, similar to previous games. Protect Breaking an enemy makes them open to being data drained, which is odd considering the enemies can data drain us whenever they want. I think it would have been a much better system where getting hit continuously and failing to learn the mechanics led to a Protect Break scenario for yourself and then led to you getting data drained, rather than it just happening randomly and there being no way to prevent it. Gives you more reason to actually try. Once in a Protect Break state, the enemy will move around and you will need to charge and then fire a skill shot at them to finish them off. You are on a timer during this, and if you fail to make the shot within the allotted time, you will have to continue the fight with the enemy back at half HP. Please God, never let this happen for your own sanity. Further, the enemy won't just be moving, but will be firing off projectiles at you the entire time. And if these projectiles hit you, you lose your charge and have to start the charging process before even attempting to make a shot. It's grueling, but this is at least the most intensive part of the fight and therefore the most interesting and challenging. After a successful data drain, the enemy will be defeated. While not consistent yet, defeating an Ida can give you a piece of data. We get Ida 011 for defeating Anna as an example. We also get data for the Phase 7 epitaph Tarvos. What these are for is not explained within this game, so that may leave you scratching your head. The funny thing about these fights is that no one but Avatar users and other special characters can see them, so I'm always wondering what it looks like to an outsider when two avatars are fighting it out. Like, there will be an arena battle later where we fight Magus, and no one will see anything for a very long period of time, while Kun and Haseo have a back and forth during several scenes. It just always felt very silly to me. Imagine just seeing two dudes standing there for 30 minutes and then one falls over for no reason. When you complete a unique fight against an Ida or an Avatar, you unlock the ability to replay these fights in the Serpent of Lore. By doing so, you unlock wallpapers that you can only get in that volume, so they are missable. If you want to replay the fights in a later entry, I believe you don't get these wallpapers. After data draining Tarvos, Pai falls unconscious and Haseo seems distraught that she may have become a lost one due to him. This is a development in his character as he has shown nothing but open hostility to Pai in the past. It's clear this is a wall he puts up around people in order to feel strong and defended. Haseo is worried about how people perceive him, and he's scared to make friends with others. But when Pai is possibly in a coma, he worries about her and shouts for her to be okay. Haseo's voice acting in this game is peak, by the way. He's a very good voice for the character.
Hey, come on, snap out of it! What are you doing? Now wake up! Wake up! Please wake up! I said wake up! Pai! Pai!
That's the first time you've called me by my name.
Don't scare me like that.
Luckily, Pai awakens and the two bond over how worried he was for her. Zelkova asks if they are alright, and it is implied that he was aware of some aspect of what was happening. Even if avatars can't be seen, Ida's black dots can be. Later on, Haseo is invited by Antares to visit Ikolo, the unique guild found in Lumina Cloth where the arena is situated. Ikolo only allows members that are currently an emperor of one of the palaces. It's here that we meet Sirius and Taihaku, the other emperors alongside Endurance. Taihaku specifically appears in Roots and completed the Brutal Forest of Pain event within the game, an event Haseo also completed that automatically placed him into his final job extension. Why Antares wanted to introduce Haseo to them isn't clear, and Sirius seems annoyed that Antares would allow a non-emperor to show up. It's also pointed out that Antares is the old guildmaster of Ikolo and seems to be the creator of it, but quit some time ago. While here, we also meet Alkaid, a popular character within the .hack series, and previous as Demon Palace Emperor before being defeated by Endurance. Alkaid doesn't take Haseo very seriously, and the two don't seem to get along. Alkaid believes Endurance cheated against her, which he did, and she's going to be really disappointed when we do the same. After the visit, Adelie informs Pai and Haseo that they have been invited to the Moon Tree Guild home by Zelkova. She assumes they did something wrong, but when they arrive, it seems to be as thanks for saving them from Ida. Moontree is made up of the Guildmaster and several captains, including Kaede, Sakaki, and Matsu. Matsu is someone we have seen once before when he showed up with Sakaki to save us from Bordeaux. It's here we learn that Haseo and Matsu's teams are fighting each other next in the tournament, and we'll see later that it is Zelkova who will be co-commentating it. Sakaki also implies that he wants Zelkova out of the picture so he can run the guild. Those rumors have been spreading throughout the world for a while now. Haseo and Matsu's teams square off, and luckily Haseo doesn't end up summoning his avatar here. However, we do learn that Matsu, while looking like a steam gunner, is actually an adept rogue, and gave up the use of his edge punisher when he joined Moontree. This is due to him previously being a notorious PK and looking to change his ways, a way to throw away his past and be someone new. Matsu agreed to seal away his edge punisher in order to be a member of Moontree. However, similar to how Haseo feels the need to use Skaith to win battles he is losing, Matsu feels forced to use his rare edge punisher to defeat Haseo. We still demolish him regardless. After Haseo defeats Matsu, Matsu meets with Zelkova, believing he would be punished. However, Zelkova points out that Matsu needed a fight against someone that would challenge him enough to use his Edge Punisher and finally let go. Now that he has had a battle he can be proud of, he can finally remove himself from his past and focus solely on Moontree. To this point, Matsu meets with Haseo and gives him his unique Edge Punisher as a gift, which Haseo doesn't want but accepts anyway. Within the span of like 20 minutes, we have seen more growth and development within Matsu than we will within Haseo for this entire volume. Following his match against Matsu, Haseo needs to fight Alkaid. However, regardless of levels, Alkaid is a much more experienced fighter than Haseo, and his team ends up getting destroyed by a Beast Awakening. This leads to Haseo using his avatar once again, but luckily restraining himself enough to not put Alkaid in a coma. Alkaid believes Haseo is a cheater, which, again, he is, but she has to hold that L. Haseo also meets with Pyros multiple times at Delta Hidden Forbidden Bulwark, the home of the lost ground Morig Baro. A sign appears here and Pyros wants to stake it out and wait for Triedge to show up. Unfortunately, we found him asleep during one visit. While visiting Pyros, Haseo hides as Adali and Sakaki show up. It's implied that Adali is special in some way because Sakaki brought her here to the sign to see if she senses anything. She does, suggesting Sakaki knows something about her and is using her for reasons unknown. Sakaki asks Adali to keep an eye on Haseo, suggesting he wants her to spy on him. Kun is once again upset with Haseo, but guess what? He is our final match in the tournament alongside Pai and none other than Antares. Haseo summons Skaith to win, but Kun summons Magus to stop him. Haseo's rage gets the better of him, and Skaith seems to be able to take over full control within the fight, decimating Magus as Haseo looks on in horror, begging him to stop. This is a defining moment for Haseo as he begins to learn just how dangerous an avatar can be. It really puts him in his place, and he believes that Skaith is going to turn Kun into a lost one and it's his fault. Luckily, after the battle, Kun reveals that Magus' special ability, Propagation, created excess data that Skaith absorbed during data drain, thus saving him. Kun figured something like this would happen and used this event to teach Haseo a lesson, risking his own life in the process. Antares is unable to see the Avatar battles, same with everyone else aside from Pai, but understands that Haseo needed this fight to learn something about himself, hence why he was hired to join and agreed to do so. Later, Yato reveals that Kun and Pai were in the tournament in order to investigate Endurance. Since they lost, it's up to Haseo now. Kun and Pai also become fully available as party members at this point, and some quests associated with them lead to further development with Alkaid. Alkaid doesn't like that Haseo cheated, but she begins to understand that there was some necessary reason for it. To be fair, there wasn't. Haseo wasn't fighting in the tournament to reach Endurance for Yata at the time, he was doing it to prove himself. It's only after he beat Alkaid that it is now a necessity. Haseo finally gets to fight Endurance, and just like the previous one, it ends up being Avatar against Avatar. Except Haseo isn't doing this for an unfair advantage at this point, but to defend himself against Maha. After defeating the Avatar, Endrance's cat falls off of his shoulder and is revealed to be Ida, unknown to him. The Ida seems to explode around Haseo before disappearing, and Endurance is left unconscious for the moment. Again, no one in the crowd really seemed to see anything, although they probably did see the Ida at the very least. Actually, the reason I'm saying people can see Ida is because there's a news article that talks about graphical glitches in the game, and it's a picture of Endurance like surrounded by the Ida. But I'm thinking about it now, and I don't actually know if people can see Ida. I think they can, I'm pretty sure. There has to be like something in one of the forums that talks about it. For becoming the new emperor, there is a crowning ceremony for Haseo and his team on an island outside of Makino. Here, Ovan approaches Adali and informs her that she looks like Shino, who Haseo was very close to. This causes Adali to break down, believing that Haseo only looked at her as a form of Shino and not as her own person. Adali wanted to be seen by Haseo. She wants her effort and progress to be acknowledged by him and for them to grow closer. However, she now believes Haseo was blind to all of what she has done so far because he was too busy looking at Shino. Adali runs off and the ceremony ends. Haseo doesn't understand why Ovan informed her of that information, but before he can ask him, Ovan has disappeared. Yata informs Haseo that Adali is a chosen one as well, and has been seen at Morig Baro, and she managed to use the sign to transport somewhere. Worried, Haseo, Kun, and Pai are sent to investigate. When they enter through the sign, the party finds themselves in a purely white room of infinite nothingness aside from a coin locker and Adali ahead of them. The concept of the coin locker will make sense later on in the further volumes, but for now it goes unexplained. Adelie demands that Haseo stay back and claims she found this place herself with her own powers. She wants to use her powers to find Tri-Edge and prove herself to Haseo so that he will recognize her worth. Adelie chastises Haseo for his treatment of her, calling her irritating and never wanting to see her face again. She believes he would have accepted another cleric or someone else if they were more powerful or looked more like Shino. Haseo denies this, calling Adelie an idiot, and she agrees that she is one. She recognizes that her self-worth is exceptionally low and that she has a hard time understanding things. Before the conversation can continue, the sound of a tuning fork plays, signifying the arrival of Tri-Edge. Haseo asks this figure what he is, whether that be a hacker, Ida, etc., but Tri-Edge says nothing and a battle commences. Now, an important thing to note here is that if you convert your IMOQ data to this game, Tri-Edge will display whatever name you gave Kite back then, so my Tri-Edge had the name Kite due to this. If you don't convert your data, I believe the name defaults to Azure Kite instead, because that is the being's real moniker, Azure Flame Kite. He even has the same voice actor as Kite from the previous games. Now with 2 other Epitaph users to back him up, the party manages to beat Kite in a fairly underwhelming battle. He does at least have a special move though. After being defeated, Azure Flame Kite transforms into a sort of avatar, but not one of the 8 phases. Becoming Azure Flame God, Haseo has to summon Skaith to defeat him. However, after defeating him, Kite disappears, and Haseo isn't able to get any information out of him in order to save the lost ones. Soon after, the coin lockers open up and seem to entrance Adelie, pulling her towards them before Ida emerges from within and infects her PC. Adelie collapses as Haseo calls out to her, and this is the end of .hack.GU Volume 1 Rebirth. After the credits roll, the game isn't over just yet. The big thing to note here is that you can now set save files with the clear flag, which allows them to be converted into the next volume. If you don't complete the game, your save file cannot be carried over. While you have defeated the main storyline, you still need to do a few things for 100% completion, if that's something you care about. For example, the End of the Abyss quest can now be taken part in, and you'll need to fight the secret boss that's the God of Death. Again, this is fought within the Lost Ground we found Endurance originally, and was a bit disappointing. Like everything else in this game, he is a pushover and not really worth our time. You do get some cool armor out of it at least. Comparing this to the original games, they used to let you go to these very unique dungeon areas that would lead to a boss fight, and those boss fights could potentially be deadly even in the maximum level for that volume. So there was a lot of challenge to overcome in the post-game in IMOQ, which just isn't there for GU. Additionally, you may choose to complete your Book of 1000 and the Vital Vista side quests if you haven't already. Finally, there is one feature I haven't gone into much detail about yet, the Doppelganger. Doppelganger is a special mob that is talked about on the forums. Sometimes when out in a field for at least 5 minutes of no combat, a doppelganger enemy may spawn, looking like the lead party member. He will teleport around the map, and if he sees you, approach you and attack. Doppelganger is typically 8 levels higher than the player's party, making the fight exceptionally difficult. However, his own level caps much like yours at level 50, meaning that you can just hit the maximum level and then steamroll him. Another disappointing aspect to be found with these optional bosses, as there really is no challenge involved. Defeating the Doppelganger will get you the Own King key item, and this has no use to us at the moment. However, defeating Doppelgangers within the next volumes will become a semi-regular task, and carrying over these key items from previous volumes will lead to greater rewards, thus giving you more to look forward to as you progress. But if you didn't know that and progressed without beating him, you can get some rewards, just not everything. .hack may be one of my favorite series as a whole, but it is clear to me that many aspects of both game series have aged fairly poorly when played today. Some people will say that games don't age, they are just aspects of the time they came out, but it is our perception on how things are played that changes, affecting how we interact with older games that may have more archaic design decisions. Despite these issues, such as the simplistic gameplay, IMOQ managed to offer a lot in terms of buffs and item management in order to be effective within the boss battles and optional content. GU, meanwhile, offers a more elaborate battle system, but one that is still heavily simplified in comparison to what you may desire out of an action game. Add onto this the lack of difficulty, and you end up with a game where the battles feel more repetitive than they do rewarding, and that's a shame. The same can be said with the Avatar battles, which we unlock late into Volume 1, and are all more or less the same with minor mechanical variations here and there. Where GU is at its strongest is within the meta-narrative, the ability to feel like you are playing an MMO even though it's a single-player experience. We even have a single-player MMO that was released or is in early access recently just to offer an aspect of what I'm talking about. I believe it's called Shore. All of this provides a charming experience for the player, offering something they probably hadn't been offered before when the game released. While the game can feel mechanically bare bones, I suppose we do need to consider that this is just part 1 of an, at the time, 3-part series. Really, GU is best looked at as the entire package, but the game's released in 3 separate volumes, so it wouldn't feel right to me to not criticize the first entry for lacking a lot of friction to help make the game interesting. GU is a slow experience, but not a methodical one, and that lack of challenge along with a despicable protagonist and plot development that only shows up after what feels like hours of MMO filler can easily cause you to bounce off of it, especially for fans of the first entries in the series. Add on to that we don't get an additional OVA series attached to release and only get news clips and webisodes of Salvador, and it can feel like GU is missing a lot of the wonder and whimsy that came with IMOQ. This game was meant to be a darker, grittier experience, but anyone that has played through IMOQ knows just how dark those games can feel, while also feeling like you have been transported to a completely foreign world. Still, the story is not over yet, and so this retrospective is only part 1 in a 4-part series. In part 2, we will continue covering Reminisce, and then Redemption in part 3. Afterwards, I'll release a collection of these retrospectives as one video, and offer a bonus section at the end to talk about the Chapter 4 epilogue that was added with Last Recode. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and let me know some of your favorite memories surrounding .hack as a franchise. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. This is the Patreon section where I shout out all the G-Rank patrons, and you can see the high and G-Rank patrons right here. It's usually right there. I'm gonna go ahead and start doing that now, but if you want to support me, feel free to check out the link in the description because it helps me pay my rent, and I like living in a building and not on the street. Gim Best YouTuber 69 _420. I think they updated the name for that. Dylan Delaney, Critical Link, Gloomerous, Backdraft 677, Natsuki Mamamura, Brendan Hesse, Metalhead Frank, Wooly, Ralkar, Ashtray, Cyberworm, Jonathan, Strange Lee, Lude Hafumi, Rosalio, and Mr. Janky. Thank you guys so much. A special shout out to Mr. Janky because they are also the proofreader of this script, and if there are still any errors in it, you can blame him and not yell at me. They are my fault, but you can blame him and not yell at me. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.